Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome into Purple Insider's free agency special here presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, just getting rolling on part one of our free agency coverage today. Later on tonight, we'll have a reaction also for all the things that have gone down in the National Football League. In a little bit, Dane Mizatani, the Pioneer Press, is going to join me as well, but I've got a rundown of everything that's happened so far, thoughts, reactions to that, and then we can get your takes on it in the comments section. And also, I've set it up now so I could just look at Twitter and talk about the moves that are dropping in one after the other. So I've got a lot of them to get to right now, and then we'll see what else percolates. But there hasn't been any major news for the Minnesota Vikings, but some very interesting stuff has happened. We will start out with the Vikings lost their punter. This is one, I have to tell you the truth, that I did not see coming. I thought that they would just re-sign Ryan Wright and they would go forward with one of the 5 best punters in the NFL last year and a guy that they really effectively stuck with and developed over the last couple of seasons. And then a shocking report from Adam Schefter that Ryan Wright has signed a 4-year, $14 million contract with the New Orleans Saints. Now, good for Ryan Wright. I mean, he is a guy that came in with a lot of raw talent and got better and better and better. And then this last year, it all came together and truly was one of the best punters in the NFL and a really good job in terms of development by Matt Daniels to stick with Ryan Wright. And, they never really brought in punting competition, and we kind of questioned them year after year. Like, why aren't you bringing in somebody else? Why aren't you bringing in a veteran? And then he was really good last year, a big part of the operation, and ends up getting $8 million guaranteed from the New Orleans Saints. I know that's not exactly where we thought we'd be starting our free agency coverage for the Minnesota Vikings, but Ryan Wright was a big part of what happened last year, especially with the defense. Very helpful in terms of flipping the field. So now that's a position that the Vikings do have to replace at some point. Also, 4 years, $14 million for a team that is tightening its purse strings is probably not the price that they wanted to pay for Ryan Wright. So a good deal for him. New Orleans gets a very good punter, and now the Vikings will have to have, more likely than not, punting competition, because if they're not going to spend on a guy that they got as an undrafted free agent, developed over a bunch of years, re-signed to keep him last year, and then had such a good season, then that likely means that maybe free agency isn't for them at the punter position. And I will just make a small, quick argument before we get to other stuff and kind of rapid fire through everything that's happened so far so we can get to your reactions, that having a punter who is an assassin and who can coffin corner and pin other teams, I think now with the kickoff and now with better field position, better starting field position, if you kick it out of the back of the end zone, the other team starts the 35 now, I think it's a big deal. I think it really is a big deal to have a great punter who, if you're at the 50-yard line, if you're at the other 45, and you can't kick a 65-yard field goal, and you need to pin the other team down there, who can do it? And Ryan Wright was great at it last year. Clearly, the New Orleans Saints feel the same way, that there is real value there. So the Vikings now on the hunt for a punter. Let's get to their one signing so far, at least not in-house, which we'll get to that. They have signed, according to Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network, James Pierre, who is a veteran cornerback, to a 2-year, $8.5 million deal with $3.7 million guaranteed. Pierre is 29 years old, and he has been with the Steelers for a long time, a guy who has kind of worked his way up on the fringes of the roster, largely a special teams player. But then last year, I mean, think about, he's been battling 100 snaps there, 200 snaps there throughout his career to finally get any real chance to get on the field. And last year he did. He was not a full-time player last year for the Steelers, but he did play over 300 snaps and was targeted 33 times, allowed only 14 completions into his coverage, graded extremely well in that small sample size by Pro Football Focus. And this is the type of veteran backup corner that the room really needs. I mean, last year they kind of took a swing at Jeff Okudah. That didn't work out. And then Fabian Moreau ended up playing this role last year. And I don't know if they want Fabian Moreau back also to go along with James Pierre. But when we look at their depth at the cornerback position at the moment, there's very little, because Moreau is a free agent and Dwight McGlothern's a guy that they've developed over a couple of years, but clearly don't trust because they were not willing to put him in as the third corner when Okudah got hurt. Okudah did not work out, got injured, but also struggled mightily when he was in there. So now James Pierre, a very cost-effective signing for an experienced player. The Vikings also hired a coach off of Pittsburgh's staff to come over work with Brian Flores, and clearly the connection there with James Pierre. So not exactly a mind-blowing signing or a huge one that's going to move the needle for the Adam Schefter or Diana Rossini followers. But last year, let's just keep in mind that the Vikings made some quiet signings, and one of them we'll get to very soon, that ended up working out very well. And sometimes it's the guy who signs the 2-year, $8 million contract who ends up being very valuable for your team. So Pierre, when he's gotten a chance to get on the field during his career, it hasn't been a ton, but has performed pretty well, has experience, can play on special teams. And just like making the argument that having a punter who's really good matters more now that the kickoff is getting teams closer to midfield, I might make an argument that having guys who are special teams experts, and I would assume that Tavierre Thomas is not coming back, are more valuable now with more kickoffs. I mean, there's so many more plays now for those special teamers than there ever were before. So Pierre comes in with a lot of experience doing that on special teams, and then has also played enough in the secondary to be trusted back there. So a nice, solid, sound depth signing that I think was probably the ones that we expected for today for the Minnesota Vikings. The way that they had talked about their offseason, the way they've handled their offseason so far, and their direction that we've kind of gotten a read on over the last couple weeks, it all pointed toward signings like this on day one. It didn't point toward Kenneth Walker, who landed with the Kansas City Chiefs. It didn't point toward the biggest free agents, a Trey Hendrickson or something, or Jalen Phillips, who just signed a huge deal. It pointed toward guys like James Pierre. And my point is just that those can work out pretty well at times if you grab the right veteran depth player. So he could be useful in the secondary. A big move that does pertain to the Minnesota Vikings is Malik Willis has found his home. So the first quarterback is off the board. And I should say that when it comes to Kyler Murray or Geno Smith or Kirk, it's going to happen later in the week when they can actually be released. Now, there's a wrinkle to that I want to get to, because Tua was released today, and there's already a team out there that's being connected. So it could happen that it comes out earlier that the two teams, if it's Kyler and the Vikings or Geno and the Vikings, if that looks like it's going to happen, there could be more along the way there, but those guys can't be released officially until Wednesday, so that will take a little longer. But the first domino has officially fallen, which is that Malik Willis is signing a contract for 3 years, $67.5 million with $45 million guaranteed with the Miami Dolphins. Now, the thing I wondered about with Malik, and the reason that so many people connected him to Arizona, was because when you start to compare and contrast, Arizona is by no means the best roster in the NFL. In fact, it's a pretty rough team. but they have weapons. They have Marvin Harrison, they have Michael Wilson, they have Trey McBride, and it looked like, with the LaFleur connection, okay, he goes to Arizona and then he's got some people to throw to and they build around him over a couple of years. But what it may have come down to, well, one, his former coach is in Miami, Jeff Hafley. So there's a clear connection there of knowing Jeff Hafley and how he's going to want to play and knowing him personally and so forth. But also, the Miami Dolphins consistently get graded by the NFL Players Association as one of the best teams for players. Doesn't mean they're always the best team. Doesn't mean they always make the right contract decisions and things like that. But they're evaluating what the work environment is like. And Miami has always done very well. Their owner has done very well. Their facilities have done very well. And the Arizona Cardinals are the exact opposite, who've just done really poorly, and their owner has gotten an F. I mean, there's a big difference there. That Stephen Ross, it has cost him draft picks in the past at times, is trying to win and is putting in the effort. And now their teardown is probably the right way to go. Tear it down, keep Malik Willis over multiple years, see if you can build around him and go from there. And if you can, if you're Miami and you can bounce back quickly, you can do it on a very reasonable contract for Willis. There were some people out there throwing numbers out that were kind of wild for Malik Willis. Oh, you could get $40 million a year. No, this comes out to about, what is that, $22 million per year, which is essentially the Justin Fields contract that we talked about for him in New York last year. It's a guy who has shown potential, but nobody really knows if he can actually be a franchise quarterback. And now he gets a big payday, but by no means an absurd payday. And if this works out for the Miami Dolphins, even in a year, if it works out and Malik is good, then they have one of the best contracts in all of football. And if it doesn't, what did you really lose? It's not like what they lost with the Tua Tagovailoa contract by any means. So Malik Willis off the board. I don't know if the Vikings were ever truly interested in Willis. I don't know if the Vikings felt like they could pay Malik Willis even at this level of contract, because we've been talking about how the Vikings are tightening the purse strings, how they are trying to kind of squeeze out every last dollar and not push all their money into the future. And also Malik Willis for the Vikings, while I liked the idea in theory because of Willis's skill set. I mean, he's fast and he's got a strong arm. And every time he came into the game for the Packers, he performed really well. But, Kurt Warner was talking about this today. I think it was on the Ross Tucker show, and he was talking about how he went through his entire tape and there were very few examples of straight drop back performances. I mean, it was a lot of bootlegs and rollouts and play actions, and he executed them brilliantly, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sam Darnold just won the Super Bowl on a lot of rollouts and play actions, and he did that in Minnesota, and Kirk made a career out of it, so you can do it. But if you're trying to look at the full sample size, there almost isn't one for Willis, and maybe the Vikings felt like, if we're going to sign someone like that, we'd want him to compete with J.J. McCarthy. We wouldn't want to sign him to a 3-year type of contract, and it's much better for a fully rebuilding Miami Dolphins team to roll the dice. So much with these signings has to do with just timing. Where are you in your timeline? Where are you as a roster? And the Vikings need a quarterback who is a little bit more on the proven side than Malik Willis. The Vikings did make a fairly significant move in terms of spending. It just happened to be on their own guy. They signed late last night Eric Wilson to a 3-year, $22.5 million contract with $12.5 million guaranteed, according to Mike Garafolo. The team did confirm that Eric Wilson coming back, and those are the contract details. There were a handful of people who wondered about 3 years, $22 million. Is it an overpay? Is it too much for Eric Wilson? I would guess that this is, and we have to be very careful on the first day of free agency because we got tricked last year. If you guys remember, we got fooled by Byron Murphy Jr.'s numbers. When they first came out, we went, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? And then we got the real numbers. Okay, well, that's much more of a market contract for a player like him. My guess is that this is much more of a 2-year, $12 million deal than it is a 3-year, $22 million deal. But I also think, and we've seen this before from the Vikings, that there is a tax involved if you want to keep your own player. If you're asking your own player, hey, do not go to free agency, come back and stay with us, well, then oftentimes you're having to pay a little bit more for that. And this is a very solid, very, very solid price for Eric Wilson to come back to the Vikings. And he was another guy that had a career revelation with the Vikings of somebody who had been a part-time player. He had started for the Vikings for 1 year and then really bounced around after that, was in Green Bay and had found kind of a home in Green Bay and played as a somewhat of a starter in 2024. But then 2025, I mean, Blake Cashman goes down, and then all of a sudden Eric Wilson is a perfect fit for Brian Flores. He had 37 quarterback pressures last year, according to PFF, and 52 run stops. I mean, when he got in there, all of a sudden with Cashman, the run defense improved immensely. And that was the run stops was in the top 10. And what that is that's when you get a tackle on a run play that is not a positive play for the offense. So creating a negative play for the offense, 52 of those for Eric Wilson, highly intelligent, super hardworking, unequivocally respected in the locker room, quiet guy. But Eric Wilson, a very, very good NFL player. And at 31, I mean, didn't look like he was showing any signs of aging last year and is not a guy with a ton of mileage on his body throughout his career. So essentially a 2-year type of contract. I mean, you can't argue too much with that number. And when you look at his comps, I mean, it kind of makes sense for where we put him when we were talking about this earlier, that it would cost earlier this offseason, probably $7, $8, $9 million in that ballpark. And that's essentially what it ends up in terms of average annual value. So a big, big, big return for Wilson. And one more on the Vikings side, which is TJ Hockenson, is staying with the Vikings as we expected. I mean, it would have been very surprising to me if TJ Hockenson was gone. And so they rework his contract to save $5 million on the cap. But this is not a standard restructure. This is a pay cut for TJ Hockenson. So they reworked his contract. This is a new contract for Hockenson that gets rid of his 2027 season. So that means that Hockenson is now going to be a free agent after 2026. They save a little bit of money. He comes back. And what this says, along with the Eric Wilson signing, is, well, this team is pruning around the salary cap. And while this team is starting to set its eyes down the road into 2027, into 2028, what are you going to do over a 3 or 4 year period? Remember, their interim GM has been here for like 25, 30 years. He's going to be thinking about the franchise in a bigger and longer perspective. The owners are not going anywhere, so are they. But it is not a teardown. This is not what they did in 2019 into 2020. This is not what they did from 2023 into 2022 into 2023, where they lost all that Pro Bowl talent. They are keeping their core players together. They are keeping the players that they feel are essential to them winning games this year and chopping off everything else around the edges, not overpaying for a punter, not keeping the defensive tackles that underperformed and maybe weren't the best fit. Even though by the end of the year, I thought Allen and Hargrave were playing better, but they're not worth the contracts that they were on. But those players, you know, they aren't a part of the long term, and they must feel like they can replace the production from those guys. But when all of a sudden you see Aaron Jones is going to get cut, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, you start to go, oh, wait a minute. So are they going to like rip this thing apart and anything that's not nailed down is going to go? And we found out the answer is no, because if they let go Wilson and they let go Hockenson, then there might, have been kind of a case of, all right, like they're really taking this thing apart, but they are not. And this is a team that desperately needs to improve offensively next year after struggling so much in 2025, you're not going to take one of your better players. And I know that his numbers have gone down, but I think that that's more circumstance than anything. You're not going to take a guy who's a former Pro Bowl tight end, who has been as good in his career at times as Hockenson, and move on. And especially if Kyler Murray is going to be the quarterback here, because the tight end position has been Kyler Murray's best friend in the NFL. So you could see if he does become the Vikings quarterback, you could see the realistic possibility that TJ Hockenson comes back with a very strong year. Also, the Vikings are using the restricted free agent tender on Ivan Pace Jr. And again, a couple of questions about this one of like, why are they keeping him and so forth. It's expected to be $3.5 million, which may be a little much for a guy who got benched last year. But at the same time, I mean, the Vikings have no linebacker depth at all. No one on the entire roster other than Ivan Pace. So, or other than now Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman and now Ivan Pace, but they've got nobody else with any type of experience. He also plays a ton of special team snaps and is depth who can easily come into a game if Eric Wilson or Blake Cashman are injured. Cashman does have a history of injury, so it makes sense to keep Ivan Pace. However, someone could give him an offer, and if the Vikings choose not to extend or match that offer, then, so let's say a team comes in with 2 years, $10 million, and he signs the offer sheet, and the Vikings say, all right, too rich for our blood, we're out. They do not get any compensation for that because he was an undrafted free agent. So they don't get any compensation if he were to get a more expensive offer and leave. I mean, that might happen. I would be pretty surprised. I think he's going to be a Viking next year at, I don't know, a slightly higher dollar figure than you'd think for a backup. I mean, I don't know. Like, look what they just paid James Pierre. It's about the same as a backup linebacker, special teamer, a backup cornerback. Like, this is about what you end up paying. Also, Jalen Redmond, they did place the exclusive rights free agent tender on Jalen Redmond. My expectation is that Redmond will sign a long-term contract extension this offseason. He was tremendous. He was a top 20 defensive tackle last year by PFF and had a good number of pressures, 6 sacks, got in the backfield, very, very effective against the run. Just a playmaker who's emerged from undrafted free agency and had been cut by Carolina. Was just bouncing around, was with the UFL, and then here he is. And this year, we kind of wondered, would he take a big step because he had made a good first impression, and he took a huge step and became their best defensive tackle, and probably one of the reasons that they're so comfortable, other than just contract, moving on from Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, is the fact that they have Jalen Redmond. So that is kind of the Vikings related stuff, unless anything has happened in the last 10 minutes. Let me get to a couple of others. I will throw this out there as well. This is maybe a big deal. That Tom Pelissero said last night on Around the NFL that Kyler Murray is the favorite to land with the Minnesota Vikings once he is officially released on Wednesday. And again, there could be reports that Kyler is going to choose Minnesota, and they could be phrased, as we'll see from this Tua report, in a certain way to be a wink, wink. All right, that's a lock. I don't know if calling him emerging as the favorite is quite that, but we do know that our friend Tom Pelissero, who is local here in Minnesota, is very well dialed in with the organization. And I'll just keep saying it. This is the best option. He's the best football player. And I've gotten to, so I went back and watched 2024. I've started to get into his 2025 tape. And my big takeaway is the Seattle Seahawks killed him like they killed everybody else. The rest of his performances were worthy of a quality NFL starting quarterback who can win here. And while there is truth to some of the things that are said about Kyler, about throwing over the middle or his deep ball and things like that, there's also a lot of examples of him hitting deep balls and hitting throws over the middle and keeping his team in rhythm and making exceptional and special plays. He performed, even in his small sample last year, like a quality NFL starting quarterback. His team was not that great, but he had double the wins in 5 games that the Cardinals had for the rest of the season. They won 1 game the rest of the year. He was 2-3 and absolutely should have won. His game against San Francisco, I just implore you to go watch his game against San Francisco. They should have won. His receivers are dropping the balls all over the place. He plays great in the game. He's a magician in the game, and they should have won that one. And I'm watching going, I think that there's enough in rhythm play. This is the big misnomer about Kyler Murray, is there's enough in rhythm play. There are times where he bails, and there are times where you go, there was a receiver there and he chose to scramble. But there's also a ton of plays where he drops back, hits the back foot, lets it go right to the wide receiver on the money on a 10-yard out route or in breakers, slants. I mean, look, we'll do it if they sign him. We'll do a big Kyler Murray tape night. I'm pulling all sorts of clips and stuff. I promise we will. But he is, at least as of this moment, emerging as the favorite as the Vikings quarterback. And there's a lot to like from his tape. And there's some things certainly to be concerned about because he's an available quarterback in March. A couple other things. So let me get to this Tua. Tua Tagovailoa was released by the Miami Dolphins, or not officially yet like Kyler, but is going to be released by the Miami Dolphins. And already Adam Schefter is reporting that the Falcons are expected to pursue Tua, which means they've already decided they're going to sign him. Now, this is also a pretty big deal when it comes to the Kyler Murray situation, because when we're looking at all the teams that Kyler Murray could potentially go to, well, Miami is already off the table, and now the Falcons are off the table. And if you were making an argument now, I think we're down to 2. I think we are down to 2 teams that would make any sense. You're not going to Cleveland because you're not insane. And your team is Arizona, another quarterback needy team. So you're not going back to Arizona on a different contract. That leaves the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers just traded for Michael Pittman, the wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts, which I thought was kind of interesting because if they're making an argument to Kyler, you should really come here and play for Mike McCarthy because we just got this wide receiver and now you can have DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. That's a pretty good combination there. I don't think their O-line is still all that great, but still, you can make an argument for Pittsburgh and Kyler Murray. You can make an argument for Minnesota and Kyler Murray. One of them is going to end up with him, I think, after today, because the Falcons with Bijan Robinson and Drake London, Kevin Stefanski is also connected with Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon. It felt like, okay, well, if there's a serious contender for the Vikings, it's probably them. And if you're Kyler Murray, what might make the difference for Kyler is that Pittsburgh plays on grass and the Vikings play on turf. Oh, and the Vikings have the best wide receiver of them all in Justin Jefferson. And one other thing here in terms of big moves that are in the division, then I've got a couple of notes and we'll get to the latest moves that have happened while we've been talking and what's going on Twitter. I've made a list on Twitter of all the big names so we can just scroll and look at what's going on. Rashawn Gary traded to the Dallas Cowboys. They get a 4th round draft pick back, the Green Bay Packers do. And it's funny because in Green Bay, they've been talking about how Rashawn Gary has faded and how he's not as good anymore and how he struggled and fallen off after that one big season. But I feel like he's given the Vikings a hard time every single time they've played. So now Green Bay would be in the mix, I would assume. I mean, they don't have a 1st round draft pick eventually in the draft for edge rushers, or maybe to make a move for edge rushers. I don't really know how they're rebuilding all of that defense in Green Bay, but they have moved on from Rashawn Gary. And a couple of other notes here. Let's see. Alec Pierce. As soon as free agency started, Alec Pierce got a 4-year, $114 million contract. And to me, I'll just say it again. I've said it many times. You've heard it over and over, probably every single year. And this one to me is even more evidence. Now, I think Alec Pierce is a good wide receiver. He's a good deep threat. He averages like 20 yards a catch, good downfield player, but $114 million over 4 years to me is more evidence that the Vikings should draft a wide receiver this year in the first, second, or third round. I don't even know if you want to wait till the third. You might want to do it in the first or the second, because if you are unclear on Jordan Addison's future, look at this price tag. What's it going to be when Jordan Addison comes up for an extension? What would Jordan Addison be asking for? He's as good as Alec Pierce. He might be better than Alec Pierce. And even then, if you're talking about over 25, 26, 27 million dollars, what is the math on that? It's near close to $30 million for Alec Pierce. That to me is near, and remember when Justin Jefferson signed his contract and people were like, oh man, that's just way too much for Justin Jefferson. Well, now guys that are not anywhere close to Justin Jefferson are approaching his contract number just a couple of years later. I'm not giving that to Jordan Addison. I feel like they need to get another guy, draft, some projects even later in the draft, take as many guys as you can, because you can't get them in free agency. Wide receivers stay with their teams most of the time. If their team's letting them go, then something is wrong. The only times they ever trade them are if they really don't think they're that great and don't want to pay them, or if they are washed up like DJ Moore or DK Metcalf, or they're unhappy. Like, that's the only time you see them traded or even signed in free agency. It just doesn't happen very much. So Alec Pierce is more evidence of that. Oh, just got a note from Jonathan Harrison that Jalen Nailor has signed with the Las Vegas Raiders for 3 years and $35 million. We knew that that Jalen Nailor was going to be highly sought after. It's just what I'm talking about. Jalen Nailor is a very good wide receiver, and I think he was a lot better than his numbers. But 3 years, $35 million, over $10 million per year for a guy who was catching 30 passes a season. It just shows you how hard it is to go out into the free agent market and get wide receivers, which is why the drum gets banged every single year here on the show to draft wide receivers. And I think Pierce's number really puts Jordan Addison's next contract in question as well. And maybe there will be some consideration with what Michael Pittman ended up happening with him of getting traded, that maybe the Vikings would think about that. But I do want to say good for Jalen Nailor, because Nailor comes into the league. Kevin O'Connell praises the heck out of him. He's a big fan of Nailor's. And then we kind of don't really see him. And he's bringing him up all the time. Like, hey man, I love this Jalen Nailor guy and really like what he can do and everything. You bring him up in every press conference, it felt like. And then he ends up having a couple of catches his first year. He gets injured. We don't see him a lot in 2023, and then really emerges in 2024 as anytime Addison was out, he was able to take those shoes and run with them. And then Addison comes back, doesn't get as many targets, isn't that big of a role player. And then this last year, I thought he was very, very good and just was not getting the ball or not getting accurate throws his way. But he put muscle on. You could tell he clearly worked hard at trying to avoid injuries that he had in the past. And I believe fully that Jalen Nailor will be a better wide receiver in his next contract than he was with the Minnesota Vikings, that his production here will not be reflective of his production with the Raiders. And when you think about their wide receiver situation, he also goes home too. Nailor is from Las Vegas, so that's very cool for him, but goes to a place where they are lacking in wide receiver talent. So they need to throw him the football. And I think if you're Nailor, going to a place where, they might draft a wide receiver to go along, now they have another high draft pick. So they're probably going to draft a wide receiver to go along with Jalen Nailor and, set up their supporting cast for Fernando Mendoza in the future. But this could potentially be a really excellent landing spot for Jalen Nailor. And it's a loss now that the Vikings got to figure out how they're going to make up for. I think all along we had a pretty good idea that Jalen Nailor was going to sign somewhere else. But there was maybe a little bit in the back of our minds of, will Jalen Nailor like be the guy and they'll trade Jordan Addison. I mean, it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. So now I think this pretty well solidifies, especially with Hockenson staying, it's not a full teardown. It pretty well solidifies that Addison's going to be here as long as he doesn't end up in more trouble that could get him suspended. I don't think he's going to get suspended for the casino incident, but Addison's going to be here and they'll kick that decision down the road on an extension for him, but they need to figure out what's going to happen at wide receiver 3. Is that going to be Ty Felton? Okay, it's an idea to have Felton involved, and Jalen Nailor was once just like Felton, where we went, what's this guy really going to be? But I don't think you can lock that in. I think they have to also look to the free agent market for a second wave cheap wide receiver, and also, I'll keep going back to it, back to the draft. Oh, I didn't mention, and I wanted to because I've gotten a few questions on it. Then I'll get to some of these other notes, and then we'll look at what's been going on, is I think that the TJ Hockenson contract sets up for Kenyon Sadiq possibly in the first round if they have a chance to draft him. Now, they've got a lot of different things that they're going to need going into the draft. James Pierre does not change the Vikings' need at cornerback, so Avion Terrell has been the guy who gets mocked to them the most, and I really like what I've seen from him so far of starting to dive into what he did in the last year. So corner is there. We've talked about defensive tackle as a possibility, the Caleb Banks or whoever else it might be in the first round, Peter Woods. But Kenyon Sadiq is very interesting to me because he's an athletic freak. It's very, very difficult to take down. His actual body build is similar to Derrick Henry, which is crazy because he can catch the ball. And they're going to use multi-tight end sets, and this ties into Jalen Nailor leaving. Like, what is the most obvious way to fill that position for now and later would be to have a number 2 tight end that is a freak with the ball in his hands and can line up in the slot. And then also, TJ Hockenson on the field at the same time, mix in Josh Oliver because some of the best fullbacks have already found their homes, Reggie Gilliam and Alec Ingold, the 2 fullbacks that have been signed. But I think they want to use multi-tight ends pretty often, similar to what the Rams did last year in their run game. So that's one way to kind of mitigate what has happened here for Jalen Nailor leaving for the Las Vegas Raiders. And again, I mean, when you see somebody, and I know that fans don't always feel this way, but sometimes you do, when you see someone come in and they struggle with injury and the potential's there and you see them work and get to the point where they get a pretty big contract, it's cool. And I have been laughing a little bit because, well, the 2022 draft for the Minnesota Vikings is absolutely a bust. He's the 3rd player today from the 2022 Vikings draft to get a contract extension. Caleb Evans went back to Carolina. Ed Ingram got $37 million. And now here's Jalen Nailor getting a big contract. I'm not saying that they nailed it, but it is kind of funny that sometimes you can evaluate a draft by how many of your guys get second contracts, and where these players went, they did, just not with the Vikings. Anyway, back to some of the notes here. So, that's good for Jalen Nailor, and you should feel very happy for someone who's really worked for it, and he's got a great opportunity there. But a hole has been opened at wide receiver 3 for the Vikings. Kenneth Walker goes to the Chiefs for $45 million. I saw that Travis Etienne also signed with the New Orleans Saints, and it was Kenneth Gainwell signed with the Tampa Bay Bucks. So I can bring up my Twitter here and get some of the latest. But with Kenneth Walker, I like Kenneth Walker a lot, and he won the Super Bowl MVP. It's clear that some of these deals are just better to not sign the number 1 guy, not sign the biggest name in the free agency, because the deals for the other running backs are just going to be better. Hey, look at that. Another ex-Viking shows up on my Twitter page here. Kyrus Tonga with a 3-year deal with the Chiefs. Here's another deal. Wan'Dale Robinson gets paid as well. Let's see what Wan'Dale ended up getting. Actually, Jonathan texted this to me. 4 for $78. Do I have to say it again? Like, draft your weapons, folks. Wan'Dale Robinson's a good player, but 4 for $78? The Jets are the team that's going crazy. So they just signed David Onyemata. They've made a bunch of moves today. They're the team that's pouring all of their cash into trying to get better around Aaron Glenn. But who's going to be their quarterback? The reported favorite to be the Jets quarterback is actually Geno Smith now. And is it possible, and I don't know this, but is it possible that Geno Smith, now that they're spending all this money on their defense and getting Demario Davis, getting David Onyemata, a few other players going to the Jets, is it possible? Oh, they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick also. Is it possible that Geno Smith could prefer to return to the Jets rather than come to the Vikings if they are interested in Geno, because he would not have to compete with anyone in New York, but in Minnesota, he would have to compete with JJ McCarthy. And even if we can say, yeah, I mean, probably ends up, winning the job because he's a veteran quarterback, would you rather have no competition at all or competition? I mean, the Vikings would provide a better situation, but it's not like they don't have any players in New York. I mean, they have Breece Hall. They brought him back. They have Garrett Wilson. And now they're spending a lot of money. I don't think that they're a contender with Geno Smith, but if you're him, do you want to compete for your job when you've been a starter for a very long time? Because there's always a chance that they end up, if the tie is going to go to the young guy. So he could very well choose the Jets. I mean, if there wasn't enough stuff already pointing toward Kyler and the Vikings, the fact that the Jets are trying very hard to fill up their roster makes me think that they believe they're going to have a quarterback who can actually play there. So yeah, the deal, $35 million, 23 guaranteed for Jalen Nailor. Whew. That's really good for him. $23 million guaranteed. That is a good deal for Jalen Nailor, and he gets to go home. Okay, we've got, Tyler Linderbaum also signing with the Raiders. And the center market, my friends, the other night I mentioned that I thought that the center market was going to be pretty tough on the Minnesota Vikings if they wanted to go into free agency and find a center. And we've already seen some average type of players. Cade Mays got a fairly big contract, and the Packers brought back their center. Connor McGovern went back to the Buffalo Bills. Teams are not letting their centers go, and the prices are going up. And that's why I didn't think that they were ever going to be in on Tyler Linderbaum. And we could see that from a 3-year, $81 million contract that no, they were never, ever going to be. I mean, that is more than $25 million a year for a center, which I'm a big believer in the center position, but the Vikings didn't have that kind of money to be able to spend. That's why I keep going back to Blake Brandel along with a drafted center. The trouble as we go through free agency here and we talk about, well, this guy's leaving or how are they going to fill this or this price is too much is I've already mentioned wide receiver, tight end, corner, defensive tackle, and now center as potential draft needs. It's going to require a little bit more in terms of draft capital, which I did want to mention, by the way. I'm going to run through these real quick. These signings. ETN goes for 4 years, 52. Again, that's just out of the Vikings price range. And it may ultimately be good for the Vikings to spend on guys like James Pierre and not guys like Travis Etienne. 4 years, 52 to the Saints is pretty big in terms of spending. The Falcons get Jahan Dotson. I was kind of curious what he would get. 15 mil seems like a lot for him. Once again, not a great wide receiver, and he ends up with a fairly decent contract, but 4 years, 52 is a lot for Travis Etienne. The Vikings could not have been involved in that, which means that, guess what I'm going to say? The draft? I mean, so they might have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds at the moment, and they need like 9 different players. So they're going to have to figure some of this out on the market that has not been on day one. The day one market is always the toughest one to play in. It's always the most expensive. And last year, remember, the Vikings on day one, they got a lot of guys and they overpaid for a lot of guys. And some of them ended up, biting them in the rear end. It might be better to wait for the running back market. The guy that I've got my eye on, I have not seen him sign yet, is Rachaad White. Where is Rachaad White going to end up? But with some of the prices for running backs shooting up with Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne, I'm not even sure that they can afford Rachaad White. It might have to be even farther down the list than that. The Giants released their punter. That might be an option. But yeah, here's another guard, David Edwards, going to the Saints for $4. So the Saints are a big spender this offseason. They finally got their salary cap right, and now they're going to have it not be right in a few years after all this spending. Diana Rossini says that John Franklin Myers, multiple suitors inquiring about him. He was a guy that every once in a while I think, I've found this guy with his data who I think people are going to overlook, and then they don't. And that's John Myers Franklin. Sounds like there's a lot of interest in the interior rusher there. Khyiris Tonga pulling in. Wow, that's amazing. $21 million. What did I just say about the day one prices? $21 million for Khyiris Tonga. Now, I did a story once on Khyiris. He was basically abandoned by his family and raised by his friend's family. And he went on a mission, and it kind of changed his life, got him turned around, and then, got to the NFL and became a good player. This is amazing for him. I'm very, very happy for Khyiris Tonga. That's great. You love to see people who have been through a lot get rewarded like that. So there you go. There's what we've got going on right now. I'll reload. Every time I reload, something new is going to happen. But I think that the theme here today, it was Joseph. Okay, so here's the Jets. Joseph Asai, the pass rusher, Kingsley Enagbare for 1 year, $10 million is probably a good deal. David Onyemata, Demario Davis, Minkah Fitzpatrick. They've gone all in on their defense. So they got to be looking for somebody who is more of a starting quarterback. They must believe that they're going to get Geno Smith. There was a rumor out there that they were looking at Carson Wentz as a potential starter, which just doesn't seem realistic at all. So here's the question for you. Let me give you a FanDuel question of the day. Let's take a look at where the FanDuel odds are right now for divisions. Right now, the division winners or the favorites are the Buffalo Bills at -125, Baltimore Ravens at -155 after just trading for Max Crosby, Tennessee Titans +165, Kansas City Chiefs at +170 after just acquiring Kenneth Walker, Philadelphia Eagles +105, Detroit Lions at +160, Tampa Bay also at +160 in the South, and then Seattle at +130. So the question is, who do you think moved the needle in the NFL for their odds today? Who should have moved the needle for their division odds in the NFL today? Let's get over to your comments, and here's what I want to know in the comments section here. Let me switch it to this. What I want to know from you guys is, what is next? What do you think is next for the Minnesota Vikings? Because as of this moment, they've mostly kept their players together, and the guys that they wanted that are veterans that they know are good and are fits for them, like Eric Wilson, TJ Hockenson, they haven't made some big move to get rid of any of those guys. So what is the next step for the Minnesota Vikings? I just went through all their needs, and we could go through them kind of one by one on the roster. Running back is certainly it. Wide receiver 3. Future tight end, I'm going to throw in there. Center, potentially. I still think after this, Blake Brandel, Michael Juergens, and draft somebody else. Defensive tackle. Oh, here's what we should talk about is edge rusher and Jonathan Grenard. So there continues to be buzz about the potential of Jonathan Grenard going. Oh, wow. Mike Evans to San Francisco. Okay. What's the price on that? That is very interesting. Mike Evans to San Francisco. Well, there goes off the table the idea of trading Jordan Addison to San Francisco. But Mike Evans, man, I never thought that he would leave Tampa Bay. That's going to be some kind of immaculate grid answer in 10 years on Pro Football Reference if you've ever played that game. San Francisco, though, they know that next year, if they stay healthier, that they're a good team. I mean, they were in the divisional round. Their quarterback, Brock Purdy, has continued to prove that, or did last year, that he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's the best in the league, but you could certainly win with Brock Purdy. And them trying to go all in with a Mike Evans move makes a lot of sense. They're also likely to lose Juwan Jennings to free agency. They've lost Deebo Samuel. They've lost Brandon Ayuk. And now bringing in a veteran there, I'm curious if there's more that they're going to do. Ricky Pearsall struggled to stay healthy last year. I don't know how much longer George Kittle is going to play. Still one of the best in the league, but he got a serious injury at the end of last year, and I don't know what his status is likely to be. And Mike Evans has had his own injuries over the last couple of years, so Mike Evans now ends up with the San Francisco 49ers. That's clearly one of the bigger moves of the day, but how much does he have left? I mean, after a lot of injuries, he's been a consistent 1,000-yard wide receiver. He's been great, but eventually at some point, people do fall off the table. Oh, Jamel Dean to the Steelers. That was another guy we looked at and talked about. Maybe I have to go back to opening the Twitter here because moves are continuing to roll in. But Jamel Dean was another guy that when I looked at the Vikings early on and thought, okay, if they move everything, then Jamel Dean is somebody that they might try to go after. But they've decided they're not going to move everything. So now he ends up with the Steelers. I'm trusting you there, Grateful Dad 78, to have your scoop correct. Next step is a depth interior defensive line for Matt. I agree with that. That is kind of going off the board pretty quickly with Onyemata and Sheldon Rankins returning to the Houston Texans. BM says Raiders are spending left, right, and center to go 6-11. That's probably true. I am really curious about who ends up with the quarterback position with the Raiders. That's somebody that we haven't really brought up because we know that they're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, but they've been on record saying that they don't want Fernando Mendoza to start right away, which I wondered if they would keep Geno Smith, and they decided not to. Maybe he just was not comfortable being a mentor type quarterback, and that's why he's going to end up with the Jets. But is it going to be Kirk? It might be. Actually, I kind of like that. I kind of like the Kirk fit with the Raiders. Cheap wide receiver free agent should be next. And I think the cheap wide receiver free agent has to be a little later in the week. We have seen some cheaper free agents sign, Jahan Dotson for 2 years, $15 million. But sometimes you got to let those guys slip through the cracks first. Robe, if not Washington, Vikings might be the next stop. Cowboys extended Javonte. Ravens have Henry. Lions have Gibbs. Bucks have just signed Gainwell. Rams have Kyron Williams, the Bengals. So who are we talking about? Oh, are we talking about Mixon? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about for running backs there? Who are we talking about? Oh, where does Jeremiah Love go? That was the question. Okay, yeah. I think that Jeremiah Love, I see. That's what you were answering. That's me going reverse in the comment section. Jeremiah Love to me is a Washington, like signed, sealed, delivered. I mean, there's a lot of potential options that they could go with there. I mean, the Giants, I guess, could consider it. Washington seems like such a great fit. Just pair Jeremiah Love with Jaden Daniels. The Chiefs signing Walker, I think you're right that, Adrian, that they would not have signed Walker if they thought they could draft Jeremiah Love. In terms of the underrated wide receivers, so Olamide Zaccheaus got signed by the Falcons, I think. Was it the Falcons? Somebody else. He went somewhere else. Greg Dortch is an option, but some guys like that, they're not really like, yes, that's true. We need Purple Insider draft receiver shirts. Yeah, that's true. Some of those guys, Greg Dortch is like a Brandon Powell. I mean, he might be able to get in there and play, but he's not going to move the needle at all. That's kind of the type of guy that you're looking at. Jalen Naylor was a pretty darn good wide receiver 3. It's hard to get somebody as good as him that is going to produce like he did. Even if you felt like, he was a no-show for 2 or 3 games, but you could hand him the ball. He was a good blocker. He could play every position. Those are hard to find. And that's why I'm talking about looking into the draft for wide receiver, but you're going to need a veteran somewhere. And I also think we need to give Ty Felton a chance. Matt Verick, fill this year's needs through free agency. Draft is 2 to 3 years down the road. If you're drafting for this year's need, you failed as a GM. Well, let me throw this out there for you, Matt, is if you're drafting anything, it might be for need. I mean, when I didn't even get all the way through the positions. I sort of stopped, and then we had news, and then I want to circle back to the Jonathan Grenard thing. Also, Dane Mizatani is going to join in like 20 minutes, and we're going to talk about whether it makes sense to trade Grenard or not. But edge rusher could be a position you're looking at if you're trading Grenard. Linebacker, I think, is one that's probably pretty set. I would expect that they're going to extend Blake Cashman. I don't know for sure. Safety is still on the table. We got to talk about Harrison Smith. We've heard nothing about Harrison Smith yet so far. Is Harrison Smith coming back? Like, does it mean that the chances are Lucky Jackson's good? Lucky Jackson's in the USFL. He signed there. I mean, are the chances that Harrison Smith returns increasing with the fact that we haven't heard anything about Harrison and what he's going to do? How much would Dortch cost? Or, Greg Dulcich? Is that the tight end? I'm guessing not very much. But if Harrison Smith is going to come back, like, shouldn't we hear about this pretty soon? Would the delay in an announcement for retirement mean that he's trying to negotiate something new with the Vikings or not? I think either way, they need a wide receiver. And Matt, says safety is the number one need. I would tend to agree with that. Right now at the safety position, they have Theo Jackson, Jay Ward, and Josh Metellus, and that's it. So, I mean, that's not really what you're looking at for a defense that loves the safety position and needs to have quality safeties there. I mean, so that's where your Emmanuel McNeil-Warren or Dylan Thieneman in the draft start to come up as a potential idea. And I like that idea in a draft where, a lot of the non-premium positions are the ones that are probably better prospects. But, I was looking at a chart yesterday from Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap about the average annual value of each position. And there's a reason they're called the premium positions. The average pass rusher now, I think maybe he was doing like the top 10 or something. The average pass rusher in the top, I think it was top 10, is like $40 million. I mean, that's crazy. You draft an edge rusher and you have to pay them $5 and it's worth 40 if the guy turns out to be really good. The same thing goes for a receiver. I mean, look at what some okay number 2 type wide receivers, Alec Pierce and Wan'Dale Robinson, have gotten. I mean, it's nuts. So positional value, I mean, it matters. And that's why I might hold off a little bit when it comes to drafting McNeil-Warren or Thieneman, because I like those guys a lot, but safety is not a position that's as hard to replace when you look into free agency. Now, maybe they feel like those guys are different, and whether Smith is coming back or not really matters more to free agency than it does for the draft, because I think you could draft one anyway. Even if Smith came back, you could draft Dylan Thieneman. But there are safeties into the second round, into the third round in terms of the projections, that are pretty impressive. And also, there's been a little bit floating around out there. There was a report that came out at the combine that there might be some issues in terms of health with Caleb Downs. If he gets pushed down the board, the other guys might get pushed down the board as well. Safety is not a position where teams tend to draft it super high. I think it might be better to be patient with safety, even if I like Thieneman a lot, and I think he'd be a great fit. But there needs to be an answer on Harrison Smith. Adrian, why did the Vikings draft Ty Felton in the third round? Let us be clear. Ty Felton was drafted with the last pick of the third round. And it's, how many times does this need to happen where a Vikings wide receiver is taken in late day 2 or day 3 and they don't do anything their first year, and then everyone goes, this guy sucks. What the heck? Why did you even draft him? KJ Osborne's terrible. Jalen Naylor's terrible. You have to give these guys time. These are not first round draft picks. Now, I don't know if Felton's going to carry on with the legacy of the wide receiver 3, but I'd like to give him a chance first before saying, why in the world did we draft him? Because he's a development player. He was, what is it, like 92nd or something overall. This was not a top 10 draft pick who's going to jump in right away. This is someone who's going to follow that same path. And I think Keenan McCardell's done a really, really good job with developing those players, as is evidenced right now today by Jalen Nailor. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just leave it. That you just set it and forget it. Okay, yeah, Ty Felton's all set. No, I don't think so at all. I think you still need to go and get a veteran player. And they've done that in the past, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. Brandon Powell was a success in 2023, not so much in 2024. And he was a great tush pusher. Oh, no, wait. No, he wasn't. But he was a pretty effective receiver in 23 for them and had a good connection with Kirk Cousins. So maybe you could find somebody like that doesn't cost you a whole lot. They also brought in like Albert Wilson and a couple other guys to compete. Jalen Reagor was there. That didn't work out. So you need to have multiple options at wide receiver 3. But I just would not write off Ty Felton because all the same people wrote off Jalen Nailor and KJ Osborne. Felton has great speed and might be able to develop. I think he's an intelligent player. I think he's got toughness. Oh, Diana Rossini mentioned that the Vikings were in on ETN, huh? Okay. For 4 for 52. That is very interesting. Well, we know that they've got to look at the running back position, and being in on somebody that ends up going 4 for 52 that they really didn't have the money to sign. That sort of sounds like when the Twins used to be in on every big free agent and they would end up going to the Yankees or they would end up going to the Red Sox or something. And it'd be like, well, the Twins did extend an offer, but that does to me say that they are looking at a running back. And I don't think they have much of a chance at all at getting Jeremiah Love unless they're going to trade up. So then you'd be talking about, even if they got a second or a third round running back, you still need a free agent running back. You still need someone who's done it before, someone who can pass protect, which is why I think that's why they would have been on ETN. He was one of the better pass protecting running backs in the entire NFL last year, which makes total sense for him to be part of a duo, pass protect, catch passes. Yes, I agree, Matt. ETN would have made much more sense than someone like Kenneth Walker because of that. But that's a lot for, the jokes are there for KOC to give him 3 carries a game. I mean, their run pass ratio has been fine the last couple of years. Matt, which free agent running backs had the highest pass protection grades? Well, you just saw one of them. Tyler Algier would be the other one that I would look pretty closely at. Tyler Algier did not have a huge sample size of pass protection, but was good at it. That's the next guy on my list. So the guys that were on and Rashad White, the guys that were on my list for the Vikings for top running backs were Travis Etienne, Rashad White, and Tyler Algier. And I think Algier is probably the best chance of somebody being affordable of that 3. But Rashad White, I feel like, has gone a little bit under the radar as Tampa Bay's running back. He was very good last year, but they missed the playoffs and they were kind of a mediocre team. But I think he's pretty good. I think he could play. Taylor says the Willis contract details are in. Dolphins looking really smart. Oh, did Algier sign? Where did Algier sign? Rico Dowdle, I am less high on Rico Dowdle. Palm Tree Yeti, does the Wilson signing, given his pass rush ability, change the calculus for Grenard? I don't think so. I think it's kind of a different job. Wilson can play on that edge, but he's not a hand in the dirt rusher. It might a little bit just because that's going to be Dallas Turner if they trade Grenard. So it may be a little bit, but I think Wilson doesn't really change. What it comes down to with Grenard is probably just the price. Who is willing to make that trade? And what Jalen Phillips got, and Phillips is in the same kind of bucket as Jonathan Grenard. I think that's going to be inspiring. Around 30 a year, that's going to be inspiring for Grenard and his side to be like, yo, you got to give me a little bit more money. But I don't know that Wilson directly impacts that. Algier signed with Arizona. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan Harrison producing today. Yeah, I mean, and every day. So, okay, all right, Algier's off the board. Then Rashad White would be my guy. Tyler Johnson and Sky Moore. Yeah, those are the types of names that you're looking at. Yep, those are the types of names that you're looking at. Steven says prefer Dowdle to White. So Dowdle is a better, I think, runner in terms of his Like his best games are better than Rachaad White's. But the question that was asked was who could pass protect? And Rachaad White is definitely in a much better all around running back than Rico Dowdle. He's a guy that can pass protect. He's a guy that can catch. Isaiah Pacheco, I think White at least has tread on the tires, doesn't have an injury history, where Pacheco, the injury history would be concerning. He runs like crazy. But yeah, no, Douglas, I agree. Mason, White, and a top 100 pick would be a nice running back room. And that's, if they were in on ETN, then that probably means that they were in on other guys like, like Tyler Algier or other running back, or then they're still looking at other running backs. Sean says the best offer for Grenard is a late third. That's going to be a no for me then. I think you have to at least get a second round draft pick if you're the Vikings. I mean, Max Crosby is amazing, and Max Crosby's ceiling, his best seasons, have been better than Jonathan Grenard's. But I don't know that Max Crosby, especially his price, is worth 2 firsts and Jonathan Grenard back into the third. I don't think so. We should trade for Cam Akers. That's perfect. Cam Akers was good, I guess. Screw it. Bring back Laquan Treadwell. Man, I'm happy for Laquan Treadwell. He's a very nice person, and he's eked out an 11-year career. He's kept grinding. Matt, Rachaad White, and Jonah Coleman made sense to me a few weeks ago. Seems where we're headed. I like that. Based Gyron, is that what that is? The Vikings need an explosive running back. Yes. And that's Jonah Coleman's got some of that. There aren't running backs. Mike Washington would be the guy from Arkansas. There aren't too many running backs that I watched in the combine or that are listed as top prospects that I went, wow, that guy's got jets in his feet. But even just young legs like someone like Jonah Coleman would be pretty good. Mama, how surprised would you be if the Vikings traded up in the draft? The way that they've handled things this offseason, I would be very surprised. I would be very surprised if they decided to trade up in the draft, because it feels like they're keeping 1 foot in this year with Hockenson and Wilson and 1 foot into the future by even considering a trade for Jonathan Grenard. And here we are, day one, all these names flying off the board left and right, and the Vikings aren't really players in this. Modern Moose you want Rico, Alexander Madison, you want Rico Dowdle, huh? I mean, look, Rico had some games last year that were wow, right? But if you look at it, it's actually kind of crazy because he had a couple game run that was wild. And then after that, by the end of the year, they were playing Chuba Hubbard again. So I'm not sure that he is an all-around running back either, but he does have explosiveness. Todd Carnell Tate from Ohio State. Here's what I'm going to tell you, Todd. Tell you a little story while we wait for more things, and then we'll get Dane Mizatani in here. We'll continue the conversation. Once upon a time, I was doing a show on the old radio at 1500 ESPN, and I was at a similar situation of this where the Vikings were thinking about, wide receiver in the draft in their future. And somebody said, man, I think they could draft Justin Jefferson. And I was like, no way. Justin Jefferson will be off the board. What are you talking about? There's no way Justin Jefferson's going to be available. And then it happened. So Carnell Tate, wide receiver. I mean, could it happen? Yeah. I mean, I think so. Any of these guys, the way that the order is expected to play out, could drop to where the Vikings are at 18. And we've seen it happen with Jefferson, and we saw it happen with Christian Darrisaw. They traded down in that draft and still got Christian Darrisaw. So some of the players that are listed in the top 10, I promise you, one of them will be available eventually. Jadarian Price, I really like, from Notre Dame. An excellent, excellent talent. Doesn't have a lot of mileage on him because he played with Jeremiah Love. And there have been plenty of instances of 2 running backs from the same college. How about Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins both getting drafted last year? Feline Masterpiece Cisco feels like a prime draft to trade back unless someone slips. I agree with that. I've been doing that a lot when it comes to the mock drafts and draft simulations. I've been trading back because a lot of times I get to 18 and there's like 3 guys that I like. But if it's Carnell Tate, I think you just take them. And then your plans are very clear for Jordan Addison. But I also think about Kenyon Sadiq the same way. those guys are hard to find and usually end up on your team for a really, really long time if they're good, and they can develop and get better, and they have very long primes like tight ends and wide receivers that are good. It's just an extremely favorable position to draft. Philosopher, I wonder if Aaron Jones could re-sign. Is that a possibility? It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, it doesn't happen very much though. Like if Aaron Jones were to get released and then sign back for $1.3 million or whatever, doesn't happen very often. Usually players want to kind of stick it to the team that released them. They don't usually want to come back. Did that happen that was sort of what happened with Riley Reif, right? When they traded for Yannick Ngakoue, they were going to release Riley Reif, and then he worked out a new deal. So I guess I don't know if they technically released him. I think they just worked out a new contract, but it doesn't happen much. And also, as much as I thought it was incredible to cover Aaron Jones, everything I had heard about Aaron Jones was so good from the people in Green Bay. And then when you get to be around him, listen to him talk all the time, see how he operates, see how tough he is, see how smart he is. It's just like, wow, man, this is the best of the best here. And this is a guy who's a 5th rounder who became a superstar, but age and production are a real thing. And I feel like they need somebody with rockets in their feet. They need somebody that can turn a 10-yard run into a 30-yard run. And that was just not Aaron Jones this last year. Cause and effect. Is love a possibility in the draft? Is our long snapper coming back? I would assume that Andrew DePaula will be coming back. Yes, he is a free agent though, and he is the best. Andrew DePaula is the freaking best. He is an incredible, incredible long snapper. So I would assume that he is. I mean, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, but now that Ryan Wright got big dollars, maybe teams are farming the Vikings special teams. Good thing Reichert is under contract. But your other question was about Jeremiah Love. I think Jeremiah Love in a draft like this that does not have tons of premium position players is probably gone in the top 7 or 8 picks. Washington is the team that's going to get mocked to him the most, but he's an exceptional talent. A lot of people have talked about Jeremiah Love in the same way as Ashton Genty, and they've said that he's an even better prospect than Genty. He's probably more in the ballpark of a Bijan Robinson or a bigger Jahmyr Gibbs. And the success of those guys, and even recently, look, it's always been a do not draft a running back high, and I've subscribed to that a lot myself. I've always thought second round was the right intersection of like high enough, but not crazy high. Your Dalvin Cooks, your Jonathan Taylors in the second round, Kenneth Walker. But the teams that have taken the plunge with these top running backs have often had it pay out recently. The Trent Richardson one lingers in the background of don't draft running backs high, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and there's been other guys. I mean, Leonard Fournette taken over. Wasn't he taking over Patrick Mahomes? Leonard Fournette. So it's not always a great idea, but these guys have had some success recently, and I expect that Jeremiah Love is going to get taken really, really high, and that the Vikings will not have an opportunity to get a look at him. But if they do, I didn't mean to do that. If they do, then you would have to strongly, strongly consider it. Just one before I die says the Ravens are not tendering Keaton Mitchell. Could be an option. That's a very fast player. And everybody that I know that follows the Ravens is so agitated that they would not give Keaton Mitchell the ball more. So I'm in. I'm in. You still need, he's not going to be able to pass protect, but explosiveness, catch out of the backfield, turn a screen pass into a 50-yard play. I think that's possible. Christopher says got an A+ if we grab Thieneman, a defensive tackle, and a corner in the first 3 picks. Yeah, loading up on defense is not a bad idea. And that's what I mean when I say Emmanuel Wilson, that's an option. Johnny Dizzle, that's an option. Josh, how was Dowdle in pass protection? Better than Mason? No, he was atrocious. Most guys are. That's the reality. Most guys are. Mason was especially bad, and Dowdle was bad too. Yeah, that's why I'm bringing up, like, Algier. I know he's off the board now, but Rashad White, that's why ETN is so valuable. There's just not that many guys who can really do it, and especially young guys who are not going to be able to come in and do it. So you need someone who can. Future retrospect says did not realize Mitchell had a 4.3 set. Oh yeah, he's got speed. He's an RFA, but somebody said they're not picking up his tender. If that's the case, then I'm in. If they're not picking up his tender, scamping around, the highest paid punter with the Seahawks just won the Super Bowl. Coincidence? He was incredible in the Super Bowl. It's going back to the start of the show. It is kind of a big deal that Ryan Wright signed somewhere else. I just assumed that Ryan Wright was going to come back and be part of the trio because now they also have to find a different holder for Will Reichard, and Ryan Wright and Will Reichard, they had a thing. Those three guys, DePaulo, Reichard, and Ryan Wright. I did a story on that with DePaulo. Their closeness, it made a difference. This is a factor. The kicking game was such a factor this year, and I don't want to overlook it because Ryan Wright leaving, I'm not even being sarcastic or snarky. He was a big part of that operation. Him and Reichard just had a great rhythm to each other, and I mean, from day one, those two seemed to click, and then Wright was fantastic last year, and you saw it in the Super Bowl. Teams now, they used to years ago be kind of designed to start at the 20-yard line and drive 80 yards. But now that's just not how anything works anymore. Teams don't do it. They're never asked to drive 80 yards. So if you have a punter that can force a team to drive 80 or 90 yards, I mean, it's a weapon, and they lost one today. So I do think it was a factor. If Reichard was a free agent, they would pay. Oh, for sure. At some point, Will Reichard, if he continues like this, is going to be incredible in terms of his pay. Yes. I think he's already the best kicker. You talk about the kicker value. They put a second round tender on Brandon Aubrey, and Will Reichard's better than him. Probably a rookie punter. Yep. Is Thomas Morstead worth signing? Oh yeah. Yeah. From the 2017, the Minneapolis Miracle game where he broke his ribs and kept punting. Yeah, I mean, he's a veteran who's been around who could do it if they needed him to. Modern Moose, what do we need more? Someone who will make our running game a real primary threat, or a hybrid guy who is highly proficient at pass blocking? It's a good question because I think that Jordan Mason is already that guy who makes the run game a threat. He doesn't have the crazy burst, but I think that he is a threat as a running back. I think you need somebody to pair with him that's a nice duo. I also think that anybody who is incredibly explosive is probably not available. That's why Keaton Mitchell, if he's being let go by the Ravens, is very interesting to me because there's just not that many guys who have that level of speed and explosiveness. Phil says Miles Price should be incorporated more into the screen game. We'll see if he ends up with that kind of chance to get into the passing game. I think he's probably more of a returner, but ball in his hands could be pretty good. Felton is the same way. Ball in his hands, pretty good. Give your buy low, high upside free agents that we're not looking at that we need to. Did the Raiders overpay for their new center and Naylor? Will Naylor be the number one? Well, yes. I mean, the Raiders overpaid, but not really. I mean, when you have a rookie quarterback coming in there and you know his center is going to be awesome for at least the next 3 years, it's not an overpay. And it's the rookie quarterback contract. I mean, that's why it's so big for the Vikings with JJ McCarthy, or if they can sign Kyler Murray for $1 million, which seems to always get left out of the conversation about Kyler Murray. It's like, he's short. Like, I know he's short, but he costs $1 million. So you can still keep all these players you like. But Linderbaum, to have that with a young quarterback, totally worth it. Naylor, I think they're probably going to draft someone. He might though. He might end up being their top wide receiver. In terms of the buy low, high upside, you're going to have to give me a bit to kind of assess who's been taken, where everybody's at, and I will get you some names there as we go on. I'll start to get you some names there. Aging Healer says JJ fans shouldn't be worried about Kyler coming in. If McCarthy's good, he will beat him out. Totally disagree. If he comes here, he's the starting quarterback. I don't think there's any competition at all. Nope. So let's go back here and bring in Dane Mizatani here in just a second from the Pioneer Press. I mean, people seem to quickly forget that NFL executives have named Kyler Murray a top 15 quarterback 3 different times in his career. So there's no competition there if he signs. Dane Mizatani, Pioneer Press. What's going on, Dane?
What's going on? I hear we're talking Kyler Murray.
Oh, just for the first time this month, we're talking Kyler Murray. Yes. You know what the main subject has been, Dane, today is other than the punter leaving, which I think is a seriously legitimate thing that is going to be hard to replace a punter that was in the top 5 last year in a lot of metrics. And James Pierre is a nice little addition. Doesn't really move the needle a lot, but I think could be a low-key nice depth piece for them. The cornerback spot. Hockenson's contract is redone. Eric Wilson is staying, and Ivan Pace is staying. And I think that I've covered most of the things that have happened for the Vikings. I think what it's really more about is the bigger picture approach here, Dane, which is that they're going to keep their own and they're going to compete, but clearly are not in the market spending like crazy. And there was a report that they were in on Travis Etienne, but he goes 452, and that's just crazy. 4 years, $52 million. Vikings don't have that kind of money to spend on a running back. So what have you made of now putting together what we heard from Rob Brzezinski at the Combine, along with the things that we've heard are on the way, like the releases officially of Aaron Jones and Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen? We'll talk about the quarterback situation in a minute, but just the bigger picture type of approach from Rob Brzezinski so far.
Yeah, I think when you look back to what he said at the Combine, you kind of think about how he talked about how they've been cash over cap, $100 million cash over cap. And when you keep kicking that can down the road, eventually the bill comes due. That to me kind of indicated like we got to be smart here with how we spend the money. And that kind of prepared me for not much to happen in day one. And it's played out that way. I mean, you mentioned they were in on Travis Etienne. No, they really weren't because they couldn't afford that. Did they want Jalen Naylor back? Yeah, I'm sure they did, but they couldn't afford that. Tyler Linderbaum, like I know people tied him to here, but obviously they couldn't afford that with I think he got something like $27 million a year to be a starting center, for the Raiders. It fits what we kind of heard and deciphered from what Rob was saying. You got to retain your own, you got to build through the draft, and you got to be smart with the money. I think a residual effect of swinging and missing so many times last year in free agency, Jonathan Allen, Javon, Aaron Jones, great guy. You kick the can down the road with him, and now you're going to get cut. Is now you just don't have the same amount of money to spend this year. So what does that mean? It means smart moves like a James Pierre, and it means Kyler Murray at the minimum. If he is actually willing to come here and the Vikings actually have interest, and I've heard the interest is mutual, like that's going to be your big signing. And then you're going to just try and kind of fill pieces here and there through free agency and look towards the draft. But I never expected them to be big players in this free agency like they were last year.
Now that the quarterbacks are starting to find their landing spots, Malik Willis is going to the Miami Dolphins, and there is a very clear, since every NFL insider at the same moment had the Falcons, wink, wink, are interested, wink, wink, in the services of Tua Tagovailoa. But that was a big one for me, Dane, for Kyler Murray, when we're asking, well, who else could be involved? He's not going to go to the Cleveland Browns. He wasn't likely to go to Miami, and he's not likely to come back on a different contract with Arizona. The Jets, to me, should not be in play. I mean, I know they're spending a lot of money, but they should not be in play for Kyler Murray. If he goes to the Jets, then all the accusations of being unserious about winning or whatever else, like, yeah, you're unserious about winning if you go to the New York Jets. There's only two teams. I see it as the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings. And now that we know that Hockenson is back and we've got a pretty good sense for where things stand, what would be your projection if Kyler Murray came to the Vikings later this week? It can happen Wednesday. It could be reported really anytime if he makes that decision. But Wednesday is when he can be released. Like, how do you think that it would play out if they signed Kyler Murray?
I think they'd be pretty good. Like they just won 9 games with horrendous quarterback play, a defense that is talented, playmaking to the point of being able to make splash plays. The defense is primed to, I think, do this something similar again after bringing Brian Flores back. The offense was the problem last year. Almost every time they won a game, it felt like they did so in spite of the offense. So if you just bring Kyler Murray in, and I know people don't like him, I know people are mad because he had the Call of Duty clause in his contract early in his career. I know there are probably players from his early time in Arizona and certainly fans that watched, that time of his career play out that probably feel a certain way about him. But I feel like he's been kind of typecasted into this guy who can't win. And that's ridiculous. Like, he's been in the peak form of his career, top 10 quarterback, borderline, and pretty definitively a top 15 quarterback when he's played every game. Look, last year, disaster, but the Cardinals as a whole were a disaster. So I think if he were to come here, and even if you're concerned about the fit, I would say just go watch him. Like, I think he would fit. Like, if you just go back and watch Kyler Murray film, like, I think he fits probably more than just like this misnomer of, the fit's terrible, he'll never fit in Kevin O'Connell's offense. But the ceiling, let me start over. The floor with Kyler Murray, I think, is a competitive team that flirts with the playoffs. And after having just watched J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, and Max Brosmer, that should be enough for Vikings fans. A competitive team, week in, week out, that flirts with the playoffs. People will say, well, does that get us closer to the Super Bowl? Running it back with the status quo of last year does not get you close to the Super Bowl either. So I think the floor with Kyler is a competitive team that could get to the playoffs and maybe scare some teams with just the combination of what he brings to the offense and what that defense, I think, will still be able to do. The ceiling, 12 wins. I don't know. Like, he's dynamic with his legs, probably will play off script too much for your liking at times. But if you can just get him to do what you want him to do, he has more talent than anybody that is available at your disposal right now. And I think the idea of, well, we'll just trade for Joe Burrow, we'll just trade for Lamar Jackson, we'll just trade for Justin Herbert, has like broken the brains of some Vikings fans. Like, everybody is comparing Kyler Murray to those options. Well, those options didn't ever exist. They were fun to talk about in November when the Vikings stunk and looked pretty directionless. But right now, you have to compare Kyler Murray to the options that are available. That's Geno Smith. That's Kirk Cousins. That's, it's not even Tua anymore because he's not there. That's Aaron Rodgers, going to be 42 years old. Those are the options that you're comparing him to. That's J.J. McCarthy, who, if you love him, I understand that you want him to be really good, but you cannot run it back with J.J. McCarthy just alone or with what he's shown so far. So when you compare Kyler Murray to those options, it's obvious who should be the choice. It should be him. And yeah, I heard you when I came out of the show. Like, if he signs here, he's starting. If he stinks and it flames out, then yeah, maybe J.J. McCarthy would step in, but I don't think he would stink. I think this is something I hesitate to compare it to this because Sam Darnold just won the Super Bowl. But when Sam Darnold signed with the Seahawks, people said it was stupid. People said it couldn't work. People said, what are they thinking? It feels like that would be the initial reaction for Kyler Murray. And then once training camp rolled around, once the season rolled around, you'd remember, oh yeah, former number 1 overall pick who was pretty damn good in his prime.
And even last year, won twice as many games as his replacement in half as many starts. And I've been watching that back for the first time 2025 because I watched back 2024. I think for me, a lot of the arguments against Kyler Murray are pretty dubious. They just don't really hold up in court. One of them being, well, if he's so great, then why is his team letting him go? Which is very odd because the Super Bowl champion quarterback's team let him go last offseason. We've seen so many success stories of quarterbacks who were let go. Baker Mayfield was let go, which I think is probably a pretty good comp for Kyler Murray, actually. No one thinks Baker Mayfield is a top 5 quarterback, but I think everyone thinks he's a top 15 quarterback. And he went to a team that had Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and pretty good offensive coaching with Liam Cohen there and had a really great season last year. And Liam Cohen and Kevin O'Connell have a similar type of system, and Mayfield is undersized. He's not a huge quarterback, but can throw the ball effectively, runs a lot. I think that there's a lot of similarities with those two. Is a playmaker, can be a little reckless, can have inconsistency at times when throwing the ball down the field. There's a lot there that connects, and they let him go, and he's had a lot of success there. Jared Goff was let go by the Los Angeles Rams. I know it was part of a trade, but when Goff went to the Lions, everyone said, okay, well, you might as well just draft a quarterback because he's not going to be there very long. And then under the right circumstances, it worked. So, I mean, I look at Arizona and I compare what they've had around Kyler Murray to what the Vikings can put around him right now and go, when have they ever been this good? Probably 1 year, 2021. And we saw that against the Vikings when he threw for 400 yards and beat the Vikings in that game thanks to a missed Greg Joseph field goal. But we've seen this in front of us. We've covered games of Kyler Murray where he's been very good. And when people bring up KOC can't adjust the offense, if KOC can't outperform Cliff Kingsbury and Drew Petzing, then fire him. I mean, truly, I'm sorry, but I tend to believe that a guy who has had tons of success with Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold, real NFL quarterbacks, and his failures are Josh Dobbs. I don't even think he failed with Nick Mullins. I actually think he got everything out of Nick Mullins that you possibly could. And a young quarterback who had never played before, who was just not ready for this and couldn't hit open wide receivers. But the actual real starting quarterbacks with proven track records before who had been in the league had wild success. They were 31-11 combined, I think, between Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold when they were starting for the Vikings. I mean, who's right in that same bucket? Kyler Murray. So if he can't adjust to Kyler Murray scooting around sometimes, which by the way, if you actually watch their games, a lot of it is in rhythm passing. It's not always over the middle, but a lot of it is in rhythm passing from Kyler Murray. And he's very accurate, which is why he has the 6th best completion percentage between 2020 and 2024 in the entire NFL. So it's hard for me. And look, if he gets here and you can't stand him and all he wants to do is play video games and he doesn't even want to look at any of your tape and you just hate the guy, then cut him. It's $1 million. But my guess is that you won't hate the guy because he's a very, very good quarterback. And if there's somebody who is going to connect on a different level with Kyler Murray, who's it going to be? Probably Kevin O'Connell, who is as good of a player's coach as you are ever going to find in the NFL. Let's not spend forever on that because that is something that I'm going to have a lot to work with in a couple days, I think. But let's talk free agent holes now. As we've seen a lot of guys come off the board, where are you directing your eyes for the next moves for the Minnesota Vikings in free agency?
Yeah, I think receiver makes a lot of sense now. If you could find a depth guy, I'd have to canvas like the board itself and look at who's still available, and also then take into account the money that's being thrown around right now, and also consider that the Vikings probably aren't in a position where they can give a pretty hefty contract to who would step in as a number 3 receiver. But Jalen Naylor, losing him felt inevitable.
Yeah.
When you throw in the fact that he has now a homecoming in Las Vegas, like it was going to be impossible. Even if the Vikings did everything in their power to keep him, Jalen Naylor might still go play in Las Vegas. But his absence creates a big hole. And so I think you have to work to find a solution for that. It could be in the NFL draft. You could just target a receiver early, but I would assume that at some point we'll see a move made where the Vikings add a depth piece at receiver, probably something in the same ilk as like a James Pierre added at cornerback, a guy who, for talking about James Pierre, a guy who like 29, going to be 30 in the fall, maybe a late blooming upside to him, but doesn't cost you a lot of money. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, who cares? I think the Vikings will make some sort of move like that at receiver because they need to. Right now they have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Ty Felton and Miles Price. So they need to bring somebody in who has experience and who I think Kevin O'Connell can trust, because I think what we've seen in the 4 years of Kevin O'Connell is that the number 3 receiver isn't an insignificant part of the offense. It's something that I think needs to be, a guy with more feel and certainly more experience than Ty Felton. So I look at receiver as a whole right now, safety as a whole, defensive tackle as a whole. But it is hard to figure out, like, especially given the money that's been thrown around in the opening hours of the legal tampering period, like what the Vikings are actually going to be able to afford, what they can commit to one singular player, knowing there are certain holes across the roster. They have money. They managed to create enough cap space with various moves that I'm sure you've talked about at length. But they're still not in a position where they can just throw it all at one guy, because there are holes across this roster, as talented as it could be if they get the right quarterback. So I think receiver right now is probably something I keep an eye on. Defensive tackles I keep an eye on, and safety, because I think at some point we're going to probably hear some news about Harrison Smith. That's not reporting. That's just right now where we're at, in the the life cycle of the NFL slate. So one way or the other, if he's coming back, great. If not, you're going to need a safety. So
what's interesting to me about Harrison Smith is that right around this time last year, I believe actually before the legal tampering period, he announced he was coming back. They got to know at some point soon here, are they trying to negotiate a contract for him to return on a 1-year deal that they can actually make work? Or is he still thinking about it? Because he's had quite a bit of time now to think about it. I know it's a big life decision, and I'm not saying like, come on, Harry, we're waiting, but I am really curious about what is taking this long for the decision, considering we've gotten it before free agency in years past when he's decided that he was going to come back. Or are they working on the rollout, or is that going to happen, maybe at a quieter time when there isn't all this big NFL news, so he can sort of own the news cycle for the day and people can celebrate his retirement? I don't know which one of those two things it is, but I also don't think that it changes the outlook to the safety position, aside from, hey, you might bring in somebody who's a second wave type signing, or you might just not. I mean, you might just kind of roll with what they had last year at the end of the season. And I do think that Jay Ward took some serious steps forward last year, and he's on that same development path that we've seen work. He's very aggressive. I think he's a really good tackler. He comes up and makes plays. He's kind of got some versatility. So you've got, 3 guys there already who you think you can play. Theo Jackson starting every single play probably is not the best, but as a dime package type of guy, I think works just fine for them. So you're really only one person away. But if Harry comes back, I think you could still draft Dylan Thieneman. You could still draft Emmanuel McNeil Warren, or a guy in the second round to be your starter if you want to. Where do you stand on the idea of trading Jonathan Grenard? Because I think if you're in Jonathan Grenard's camp and you just saw what Jalen Phillips made from the Carolina Panthers, and you look at your numbers and you look at Jalen Phillips' numbers, and you go, I'm sitting here in the low 20s and I kind of want to be in the 30s. Not Max Crosby money, not Nick Bosa money, not Micah Parsons, but I could see where he could say, hey, look at my production. And I know sacks were down, but pressures, I think we're smart enough as a society to look at pressures and say that his numbers are going to come back, and his overall impact and his leadership and what he means to the locker room. At the same time, the longer I talked about trading Grenard, the more it made sense to me. 29 years old, which is not at all old, and he could be good for 5 more years. But if he's going to cost $30 million eventually, and you already owe him a big chunk of cash, not to mention it's supposed to be a deep draft of edge rushers, and Dallas Turner was just much, much better at that position when he was playing in favor of Jonathan Grenard when he was injured. It started to kind of add up to me for also a team that wants to win now, but also is in desperate need of future draft capital.
Yeah, like my initial reaction when we see the news reported that Jonathan Grenard could be had in a trade was, why would they do that? He's one of their best players. But I as I thought more about it, kind of like you, warmed up to the idea. I'll preface this by saying I don't know that it would be a great idea to trade arguably your best defensive player. But when you do take into account some of the things that are kind of at bay here, If you're going to have to give him a big raise, like that's one of the, I think, check marks that would fall into the maybe you should trade him category. And then you look at the Dallas Turner, ascension that he took, and particularly in the Jonathan Grenard role. That's another check mark that would say, like, maybe we could do this. Uh, I don't know, like, until I see the package that would come back in return, if I would say, like, good job or not. But I don't think it's crazy to consider doing it. And the more I think about it, the more especially if Jonathan Grenard is saying, or his camp is saying, we need a huge raise, then yeah, I could get behind it. Again, I don't know that. I mean, it doesn't make you better next year. It probably makes you worse because you're taking away a very, very good player. But you have to make hard decisions when you're in a situation like the Vikings are in now, where, like Rob Brzezinski said at the combine, the bill is coming due. You've spent a lot of money. The bill is coming due. And Jonathan Grenard was a great signing, and he's played a role and been a good soldier through this all, and been underpaid by the metrics that kind of exist in judging pass rushers in the NFL. And now you see the other money getting thrown around. Like, yeah, why would you not want to get a fair market deal if you were him? But right now, if you're the Vikings, I think if it coincides with him needing a raise, like, it might be the right time to just say, okay, we appreciate everything you've done. Thank you for your service. And by the way, like, right now, you could still get a pretty massive haul in return, I would think, for Jonathan Grenard. Every year that goes on beyond this, you're probably paying him more money, and the bar is going, like, your money's going up and his value positionally is probably going down. So this might be a sweet spot where you could consider making a move. And even if it doesn't make you better right now, like, I think it could set you up in a way to feel good about where you're headed. And you can't overstate it. It would be a huge prove it now moment for Dallas Turner, a guy you've traded tons of draft capital for in the past. And, he's probably expected more early in his career, but at the same time, he's been playing behind Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. So this would be a chance for him to kind of prove that he's who you thought he was when you traded up to number 17 and took him in the 2024 draft. So we don't know what it will look like, what the trade package would be. And because of that, you can't just, like, if the Vikings end up only getting a third round pick, I'd be like, that was terrible. But if they get a second round pick and, another player, or maybe a first round pick after seeing Crosby went for 2, like, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard for me to argue that it was a terrible move for the Vikings. But if whoever gets Jonathan Grenard in the trade probably wins the trade in the short term, just because more often than not, you get the better player in the deal, you probably win the trade.
It absolutely, for me, comes down to, with Jonathan Grenard, what is the price tag? Because you could just play out his contract, which is, you could do that. Just because a player asks for a new deal doesn't mean you have to give it to them. And you could let him go after this year, or you could let him go when the contract expires and get your comp pick down the road, or whatever you want to do. If it's a third round pick, to me, you're just getting crushed in that trade, and I don't see the reason, unless there's a serious conflict between him and his representation and the Vikings. And right. I also look at the trade for Max Crosby, and, well, I mean, Jonathan Grenard is what, younger than Crosby, or about the same age? And their PFF pass rush grades last year were not that different. Their pressure rates were not that different. Crosby got more sacks. We know Jonathan Grenard is capable of it. I don't think that a first round pick makes sense for a lot of teams to be trading for Jonathan Grenard in a draft that is supposed to have starting edge rushers available. But I think a second round pick is more than enough to ask for Grenard. And then when you start adding it up, and I was doing this the other night on a draft simulator, and I got a second and a third for Grenard. And I started to add it up and look at this draft and where it's strong and what the Vikings need and go through it. And I'm like, yeah, it looks pretty good. Like that actually looks pretty good if you could get a couple of draft picks in this draft, because I think that there is a lot of strength in the back end of the first and in the middle parts, through the middle parts of the second and into the third, with guys at certain positions that might be contributors, and one of those positions is edge rusher. So if you went out and got, a very cheap veteran edge rusher who was a rotational player, what they did with Jihad Ward, I know he ended up blitzing up the middle a lot, but he was an outside linebacker type, edge rusher type, very, very cheap for the Vikings 2 years ago. You find a guy like that and you draft someone in the second round, third round, whatever it might be, that could contribute right away. And then you have Dallas Turner play every snap he can, Andrew Van Ginkel play every snap he can. And what we've learned about Eric Wilson too, and this might have been some of the reason they keep Ivan Pace, is that if there's any player who could take over the Andrew Van Ginkel role, it's actually Eric Wilson, who can play outside linebacker, edge rusher if he needs to. And then they could play, the 3 down linemen as defensive tackles, assuming that they get defensive tackles. And this is a little bit of the hard part, Dane, because we were just at the NFL Combine and we're talking to people and we're talking to draft analysts and we're listening to all this and we're watching guys do their thing. And I kept coming back to, well, there's a lot of players that I really like as their fit for the Minnesota Vikings. But my preference would be that they take someone like Kenyon Sadiq in the first round and they just continue to have weapons and set themselves up for the future past TJ Hockenson. But you can make a really good case for they need a DT. They need a corner. They need a center. They need, there's a lot of needs across the board here that I don't know if they're not going to spend anything in free agency outside of these small little deals. I don't know how much impact you can expect right away. So if you're moving on from Grenard, then you're kind of saying to Brian Flores, hey man, you're going to have to kind of work some miracles here. And I know they had some success with games that Grenard was out, but you're going to have to work some miracles here because you're not getting a ton of extra help and you're going to have to develop players right away quickly to get them into your defense and not, just send every young player packing in favor of somebody who's 35 years old. It's going to have to be a little bit different, I think, this time.
Yeah, it would. If you're doing that right now, if you're making that trade, you would have to commit to probably developing the talent in house or canvassing the market for certain people and finding a way to kind of make lemonade out of some lemons in certain situations. But I do think it's an interesting point about as the free agency continues to kind of play out for the Vikings, whether they do make a splash move in this first wave or whether they wait out this first wave and try to make more of a concerted move in the second wave, it probably will inform how we think they'll approach the 2026 NFL draft. Because you're right, there are holes on this roster still that need to be filled. And you can fill them with there are people available in this first wave still, in the potential second wave, if you're just projecting it out, that can fill those holes. But if you don't spend any money, you're probably then committing to a first round pick to fill one of those holes. So zooming out and kind of bringing it back to the Jonathan Grenard conversation, like if you move on from him, yes, I agree that you're going to need to kind of look Brian Flores in the eye and say, we need to commit to in-house development. It also kind of brings me back to what Rob Brzezinski said at the Combine, where he said, we have to retain our own and build through the draft. I think building through the draft means playing certain players. Maybe it is a second round pick. Maybe you do trade Jonathan Grenard and the first round goes by, you use it to fill a hole and you drafted an edge rusher in the second round. It might mean playing that guy probably more than you've wanted to in the past, or more than you played Dallas Turner in his rookie year. You might have to kind of force the hand of Brian Flores and say, look, this is what we have, and we need to commit to developing these guys. Is that something that would happen? I don't know, because a lot of the times it's been, at least, as good as Brian Flores has been, fantastic defensive coordinator, has gotten the most out of this roster that I think you could get. It's been, can this young player do it for me right away? Nope. All right, let's bring in Fabian Moreau. Let's bring in a veteran who I know can. It's hard for me to, I guess, totally be out on that strategy because the defense has been really good. But I think when you consistently go the route of screw the young player, I need a Fabian Moreau, you lose a Nashawn Wright sometimes. So you need to, and look, we're splitting hairs. We're talking about Fabian Moreau and Nashawn Wright. But I think if you're going to trade Jonathan Grenard, this is the point. Then you have to commit to one, obviously Dallas Turner, but developing players that are coming up through your system, whether that's a savvy move you make in free agency or a draft pick you spend significant capital on here next month. So interesting things that will kind of obviously kind of play out and dovetail from what we learn here over the next 3 or 4 days. And then probably after that, 3 or 4 weeks before the NFL draft rolls around.
Okay, I want to get people updated on some things that are happening in just a minute. But before I let you go, Dane, thanks for popping in here free agency day. I thought you might be free. I didn't think that we would be wrapped up with 15 different signings.
No.
Over on FanDuel, I like to ask you about this. The Vikings are plus 700 to win the NFC North. I'll give you the rest of them. The Lions are plus 160. They're the favorites. Green Bay plus 170. They're second. And Chicago is plus 390. They are third. Has anything happened yet, or do you think anything will happen in the NFC North other than Kyler Murray joining the Vikings, which would, I think, shift the odds at least a little bit more in their favor? But for the other three teams, is there anything that can happen in free agency or that has happened so far that's moved the needle for you where you would say, okay, well, this team is moving up or this team is moving down for one of those teams? Because it did look like for a minute there that Chicago was clearing cap space for Max Crosby, and then that did not happen. So Crosby would have been a game changer. But has anything else today in free agency changed the game for you in the NFC North?
No, not right now. And I don't actually foresee that happening, largely because Detroit did what the Vikings should have done, and they lost enough games to have a last place schedule. So they're a team with a ton of talent, a team that, obviously last year was a Super Bowl contender that had a down year, that now gets to play the worst teams across the NFL because of their last place schedule, and that's going to help them in the NFC North. So I get it that the odds are close between the Lions and the Packers right now on FanDuel, who's favored to win. I would still give the edge to the Lions regardless of what happens in free agency because of the teams they get to play and the teams the Vikings insured they don't get to play because they won 5 games down the stretch. I think the odds with Kyler Murray, whenever he signs, I'm almost operating it as a certainty at this point with the way it's been reported. It feels like it's only a matter of time. I would expect the odds to at least shift a little, like the Vikings not to be plus 700 I think they'd still be the dogs in the NFC North. I don't think Kyler Murray moves the needle enough to have them jump, say, the Bears. But I think the books probably protect themselves a little bit if Kyler Murray comes to the Vikings, just because theoretically, like I came on here and said, in the theoretical ceiling of Kyler Murray is maybe 12 wins. I think the books probably take that into account. I think that would move the Vikings up a little bit in terms of how the books view their potential to win the NFC North. And I would even go as far to say, if the Vikings sign Kyler Murray, it's probably worth just throwing $10 on the Vikings to win the NFC North because I think the value is going to be there. And I think that's something that could rapidly change in, say, the first month of the regular season next year when you realize, this former top 10, borderline top 10 quarterback now gets to play with the best receiver in football. It looks pretty good. And I think those odds could then shift significantly towards them maybe being more favorable to win the NFC North. So nothing changes right now. But I think the Vikings, obviously if they're able to bring in Kyler Murray, it'll bump them up a little.
Dane Mizatani, Pioneer Press. Thanks for stopping in, my friend. And let's both hope for a little more intrigue as we go throughout the day, because I'm also going to be doing a night version of this show later on as well. And there's lots of questions. There's not a lot of answers at the moment. And the quarterback thing, it does seem to be approaching that. But one thing we know for sure is to never count the chickens before they hatch with the Minnesota Vikings. That's for sure. So thanks for stopping in, and we will talk soon. Thanks, man.
Sounds good.
Dane Mizatani there, Pioneer Press. Let's get up to date on what's been going on, and then we will get back to your questions, comments, and I'll start to formulate some takes and some thoughts on today's events. So we've got all right, we got a blocking tight end signing with the Chargers. That's nice. Okay. For the Titans, John Franklin Myers was somebody that I was very interested in, and he signs a contract with the Titans. Wan'Dale Robinson, Alante Taylor, and Cordell Flott both signing with the Titans, huh? Okay, well, that's interesting. Flott was somebody, no longer, the NFL's gotten smarter, and it's frustrating to me because no longer does it feel like I can spot the under the radar guy. I'm like, hey, this Cordell Flott dude's kind of pretty good, and no one's really talking about him. And then he signs a big contract. What is it? 3 years, $45 million. So yep, so much for that. So much for oh, I've spotted the under the radar guy. The Bengals signed Brian Cook. I was intrigued by him potentially for the Vikings. 3 years, $40 million, a little bit too rich for their blood. I mean, I think when we look at the rundown, so Ari Myrov, a friend of mine, has the rundown here. Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker, signs with the Giants, 3 years, 36. We talked about those Titans signings, the Bengals getting Brian Cook, the safety from the Chiefs, the Seahawks re-signing Josh, I think that's supposed to be Job, 3 years, $24 million. And then J.K. Dobbins returning to the Broncos. So that's another guy that is off of the board at the moment. So a lot of guys coming off the board, but look at these prices. I mean, I thought that Cordell Flott was a good player. 15 a year is a lot. John Franklin Myers for $63 million over 3 years. That's a lot. The Titans really trying to take a big step forward here by spending money, but over $10 million for Brian Cook. I think he's a good player that, again, seems like a fairly high price. And that's kind of what you end up with on day one of free agent signings is you're going to pay the absolute top dollar. So we'll keep an eye on what comes next, but a lot of movement there recently. Oh yeah, Mitch Trubisky too. There was a few times, a few people brought up Mitch Trubisky as an option for the Vikings. That's kind of, I don't think so. I mean, if they wanted a pure backup, then that would be the answer. But in terms of somebody who's going to be a potential starter, then that would be a no for me. So let's get back to your guys' thoughts. You listened to Dane Mizatani there talk for a little bit, and I'm curious about your answers. The FanDuel question of the day is: anything in the NFC North move the needle for you? I don't know if trading Rashawn Gary means much because his production had gone down, but still he was a talented player for the Green Bay Packers, and it seems like they need to make a fair number of adjustments as well. They lost Kingsley Enagbare. I mean, these are guys who played a lot of snaps for them. So Green Bay's defense is a little bit on the suspect side, aside from Micah Parsons, which has been the case for a while. How are they going to fill that out? So let's get back to your thoughts. And I'm curious about what you guys think the next move should be for the Vikings. What you think of, I mean, any take that you want that we've addressed, what they did with TJ Hockenson, what they're going to do at the running back position, bringing back Eric Wilson, moving on from certain players that's been reported, Kyler Murray, anything on your mind. Let's cover it, and we'll see what comes about the next hour. And then later on, we'll be back. Andrew Kramer and Manny Hill are going to stop by from, I'm thinking like 7 to 9:30, 7 to 10 later on tonight for a full recap of the day. Josh says, surprise, Rashid Shaheed is not signed yet. Now, there was some thought that he was asking for too much, I think, from the Seahawks, because I believe Seattle wanted him back, but he's asking for too much. So that could be a price tag thing. If his price tag gets lower, I'm interested. I mean, I know they already have their punt returner, but somebody who is pretty special with the ball in their hands and is a downfield player. But if you are going to have a quarterback who throws underneath and needs yards after catch, but it seems like he's going to be expensive. I will do another offseason simulation probably after today, once we have answers and we start to look around. Bradley, are there any centers left? I have not seen anything about Luke Fortner, but the centers are starting to be scooped up. I did see that Cade Mays signed, and Connor McGovern signed. There's not many left. That's why I keep going back to best idea is just to play Brandel. And then when you start to look at what Brandel costs for his production last year versus what these guys are costing in free agency, it's just better to stick with Brandel. He's not that much different than Luke Fortner or Cade Mays in terms of how he played last year, only he is cheaper. Michael, couldn't the Vikings sign both Murray and Smith? No, they could not. I mean, from a financial perspective, yes, but the guys have to agree. It's not like Madden where you just click and say sign, and then they sign. They would have to be on board with signing with you. And I think at least it feels like Geno Smith wants a chance to start because there seems to be growing buzz that he's going to go to the Jets. And he, I think, would have to compete in Minnesota. I do not believe that Kyler Murray is competing in Minnesota. I think it is different for those two guys. USS Liberty, the white guy, Eagles safety. Reed Blankenship. He has a name, sir. He has a name. Blankenship was not good last year, but has been in the past. As far as a cheap signing, yeah, the safety position is always out there. They don't have to rush. I just would like to know what's going on. I'm just very curious of why Harrison Smith has not announced something yet. Does that mean they're working out a deal, or does that mean he's waiting until the first wave of free agency in order to announce his retirement? Because you don't want to do it on the first day of free agency, and then it's a footnote, and he deserves more than a footnote. Aaron, what would you pay for Jawan Jennings? I like Jawan Jennings a lot, actually. Now that Mike Evans is on a 3-year, $60 million deal with the 49ers, Jawan Jennings, I mean, I would give him what Naylor made, but can they afford it? I think he's been around the ballpark of a Jalen Naylor level wide receiver. He could throw better. KOC can use him for, how about trick plays where Jawan Jennings, former quarterback, and Justin Jefferson throw it back and forth to each other. Jennings is a solid number 3 who can flex to a number 2 if you need him to, which is, I think, from what Naylor's price tag showed us. I mean, that's probably $11 to $14 million a year, which might be a little too much, but I like Jennings. I'd probably go 10 if that was possible. Mariota staying with the Commanders. I thought so. I don't believe that anyone views Marcus Mariota as a starting quarterback. He always fell under the category to me, if he was going to come to the Vikings, as a guy that shows you believe in JJ McCarthy. And since we haven't seen a lot of evidence that they believe in JJ McCarthy, I just didn't have him on my list very high. I like Mariota as a backup, though. He's about as good as it gets. Alex says Caleb Downs / Jeremiah Love would be Viking draft time with the recent free agent signings today. Will be a Viking. Maybe. I mean, I don't ever want to say, because of what I mentioned earlier about Justin Jefferson and me mocking someone for, oh, Justin Jefferson would be a great Viking. Come on, he's going to go in the top 10 or 12. Get out of here. They're not going to be able to pick him. So I'm not going to be that person. I just would say that based on the thought from the mock draft community, who is not always right, and Shadur Sanders certainly proved that to us. Malik Willis did a couple years ago. Who was the corner last year, got drafted by the Cardinals, that was mocked in everybody's top 10, went in the second round because of some injuries. So you never know. I just feel like those two players are unlikely because they are just really good prospects. They are at the very top of the list. Hoopstock says Vikings aren't winning the North with Kyler Murray, with a laughing emoji, actually 2 laughing emojis. The Vikings won the North with Case Keenum. The Vikings won 14 with Sam Darnold. The Vikings won 15 with Randall Cunningham, who came out of retirement. The Vikings went 8-2 with Jeff Jordan. I don't know, man. I think football's kind of hard to predict. And when you have this caliber of weapons around your quarterback, to say they could, I mean, last year they weren't that far off from the team that won the North. So I don't know. That's pretty dismissive for a guy who does have an 11-win season in his past, and who, I mean, the team won 11. He won 9 of those games, I think, that year with some injuries in 2021, with a guy who's been consistently voted by the NFL, not me, the NFL, as a top 15 quarterback. He's been 3 times within the top 12 by PFF. You can't win. I don't know. You could win the North. The Packers are not perfect and certainly are showing some of their shortcomings and issues on defense today. The Lions still have offensive line issues. They just lost their left tackle. You can't tell me that they're going to build an entire offensive line in one free agency and draft. And the Chicago Bears are certainly a regression candidate. I think that they will be good, but they didn't get Max Crosby, and they lost DJ Moore to a trade. And Caleb Williams was not perfect last year and could have a tougher time this year. I mean, I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem crazy to me. Mama says we still rank Kyler the worst QB in the North if we acquire him. Love and Goff are better. Caleb coming off one season. You're right, Christopher. They did make the playoffs with Christian Ponder. So to say it's not, they almost made the playoffs last year and they were 28th in offense or whatever. I think well, it depends, because Kyler at his best is as good as Jordan Love and maybe a shade below Jared Goff. And I think he actually kind of plays a lot like a more accurate but less risky Caleb Williams with the scrambling. At his absolute best, he's as good as any of these guys. Is he still at his absolute best from where he was a couple years ago is a question, but most of the quarterbacks who have played here have shown their best. If they're good or if they're experienced, they have shown their best. And I mean Kirk and Sam Darnold, and even going back when you have receivers of this level, Case Keenum, Sam Bradford. I mean, gosh, when they got Sam Bradford, a lot of people said, oh, this guy's not good. He's not worth it. Look at his career quarterback rating. He was a very good Viking. And then the same for Sam Darnold. Oh, he couldn't possibly. This guy stinks. Look at his career stats or whatever. It's like, how many times does this need to happen before you think, yeah, probably anybody who shows up here who is a veteran, let me put that asterisk on it, who's done it to some degree before, could probably again. And I mean, even Daniel Jones, guys. Daniel Jones has never been as good as Kyler Murray, and he played really well with a good team last year. This has happened so many times that when you say, oh, I mean, his team's letting him go, he couldn't possibly. Like, have you been watching the league? I mean, this has kind of happened a bunch. Make him compete. There's no competition. You're talking about a top 15 quarterback versus a guy who ranked 42nd out of 45 last year in QB rating. I mean, Murray would have to be atrocious in training camp to not be the guy. It just, or McCarthy would have to take steps forward that are unfathomable for him not to be the guy. Just for 1 year. And I'll continue to go back to it. I think this is the best thing for JJ McCarthy to develop and get the development year that he needed. And there's just so many good quarterbacks who have had a year on the bench, including the Super Bowl champion, Sam Darnold with San Francisco, had a year on the bench. Dan says Addison, Head Honch says you can't give up on JJ. See, I think it's the best thing to not give up on JJ, to have Kyler Murray play next year. And he might, get banged up and you might still see McCarthy, but I really truly believe in the development year for quarterbacks. There's just way too many examples over history of guys who have had that opportunity to step away or to develop for a year as a young player and work out for there not to be something to it. I think it's the best thing for him. And then it gives him an opportunity to truly focus on improvement and development to when he does step back under center. And Malik Willis just got signed as a starting quarterback for a team he was given up on with Tennessee. He was a backup with the Packers and took huge steps forward when he was a backup. It's a model. It has worked many times. Ryan Tannehill started out in Tennessee as a backup to Marcus Mariota, ends up having a very good career there. The examples are all over the place. So I like it for JJ McCarthy. Dan Addison in trade talks. Is there a report on that? I haven't seen a report on that. I also have never been against it. I've just always viewed it as unlikely. When you see Jalen Naylor leaving, when you see the price tag for Jordan Addison, how cheap he is, where they're at from a salary cap perspective, it's very hard to justify. Now, if you were going to get a second round draft pick for him, I mean, once upon a time, Hollywood Brown got a first round draft pick from the Cardinals, the great organization that they've been for Kyler Murray, by the way. Go back and look at some of the wide receivers that he's had to play with since DeAndre Hopkins. And Marvin Harrison does not count as a great wide receiver yet. He has not proven that. But, I mean, they trade a first round pick for Hollywood Brown. If someone got nuts for Jordan Addison, then I would do that. I would do it if they got nuts, because he is not Justin Jefferson. Hoops talk, if the Vikings think this little of McCarthy, then KOC should have been fired. You mean if the 49ers thought so little of Trey Lance that Kyle Shanahan should have got fired? Is that what you mean? It happens, man. It happens sometimes. Commanders 2027 first for Addison. It's interesting. It's interesting. I know that, you know, we've been over this with the JJ stuff. I'm not really going to argue about it today because I've done enough of that, but sometimes quarterbacks just don't work out, or sometimes quarterbacks need time. And I feel like it's been very, very hard for a lot of Vikings fans to accept that, but the results are reflective of that. They're reflective of either two things. Either JJ McCarthy's not going to work, or JJ McCarthy needs more time. There was nothing in last year's performance that's reflective of he was failed by his coach, or he was victimized by something, or that he secretly was awesome and we just couldn't see it with our football eyes. I don't know. It's really those other two options. So in my mind, and by the way that they're acting, potentially bringing Kyler Murray here, pretty well tells you that the options for him are going to be develop behind someone else and then maybe get a chance to still succeed or completely fail. So don't compare him to Shanahan. Why not? It's the Kyle Shanahan. If you're saying Shanahan's so much better than KOC, why did he draft a bust? Why did he draft a bust? He's a genius, right? Isn't Kyle Shanahan a genius? Why did he draft a bust? If you're saying KOC should be fired for drafting a guy who didn't work out in his first year starting, then I guess Shanahan should have been fired when Trey Lance didn't work out. I guess everyone should be. I guess everyone who ever drafts a quarterback that didn't work out should be fired. That's what you're saying. I don't think it's gonna matter if you want Kyler Murray or not. You know, the people who have gone on the internet and spent days yelling and screaming about how they don't want Kyler Murray and who have been wasting all of their keystrokes. I mean, it looks like it's probably going to happen. So if it does, then I guess you'll just have to not watch for a year. I don't know. It's been very weird. Some of the outrageous reaction against a quarterback who's going to cost $1 million. There's no risk whatsoever, and the upside is high. It really seems like it's just maybe not accepting the fact that the organization has decided that they're looking at starting quarterbacks that aren't JJ McCarthy. That's the best I could do there. Would I do a 2027 first for Addison? I would do that, yes. Because I think that you can find another wide receiver, but it would leave them really light in the wide receiver room right now. And if you get, that's the problem with these conflicting things, is that if you're going to get Kyler Murray, you want him to succeed, or Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins. You want them to succeed. And Jordan Addison is a very good wide receiver. But I guess if someone's offering you even out into the future, a first round draft pick, it would be pretty hard to deny that they would be able to do that. I mean, if someone's offering that, it's hard to turn down, but who's playing receiver? I guess you have to draft one in the first round then this year. But you got to have the draft capital to be ready to potentially draft a quarterback in 2027 if you need to. If you don't feel like you're in a good spot with Kyler, whoever else, and JJ McCarthy. Chris says, worst case, both quarterbacks don't take a step, draft another one in 2027, right? I mean, that's a very reasonable option, is to think about 2027 as a potential. That's the thing. If Kyler Murray goes 8-9, or if he plays 4 games and McCarthy comes in and doesn't play well, then you're looking at drafting one in 2027. Josh says, looked at it as if they sign Kyler, they are done with JJ, but you just sway me. They don't have to be done. They do not have to be done with McCarthy. They do not. He is 20. Is he going to be 22 or 23? 23, I guess, which is younger than when Bo Nix was drafted by the Denver Broncos. And I know that the rookie contract thing gets in the way. The rookie contract complicates it. It does not make it impossible. And if you're setting up your future for, well, also, like, look at Bryce Young. The Carolina is still not 100% sure on Bryce Young. I'm sure he's up and down. He's been good at times. He's been bad at times. So you can always pick up that 5th year option. It's usually about half the price of the top starting quarterbacks to pick up the 5th-year option. If you felt good about McCarthy, you could do that, and about where he's at, and give him another chance to potentially start. There's so many examples through history of, it usually just happens somewhere else. It usually just doesn't happen with that same team, but there's no reason why it couldn't. Jordan Love spent 3 years developing behind Aaron Rodgers. What it comes down to for me is JJ McCarthy and his commitment to it. If JJ McCarthy committed to, I'm going to be the best backup quarterback that I possibly can be. I'm going to learn the most I can. I'm going to develop. I'm going to give it everything I got. Then we've seen enough skill there to believe he can get there. It's just that if you go out, and this is why I believe this is better for JJ McCarthy all day. If you go out next year and you say, JJ, you're our guy, we're not signing Kyler Murray, he's too short, or whatever the internet says. JJ, you're our guy. Again, this is clearly not happening since they're in on all these quarterbacks, but let's just say that they did that. Okay. And then he struggles in his first 5 games and you bench him. Is he ever playing for the Vikings again? No. There's a much better chance that he develops for a year, comes back fully ready, fully in command of the offense, with big improvements, with full health, by the way, which has not his fault, but it's kept him from development. Full health for an entire season behind the scenes, come back ready to go, and then win a quarterback competition in 2027. That's possible. That's, Doomer KO. I wouldn't trade him for draft picks right now unless it's really good draft picks. Then I wouldn't. Not right now. Adrian, giving Kyler the starting job would not be fair to JJ. I don't care what's fair to JJ. Why would we care at this point what's fair to anyone? They need to win games. They need to keep Justin Jefferson. It's not fair to Kyler to even have him compared to someone who was as bad as JJ McCarthy was last year. You want to talk about fair? Kyler has produced way more in this league. I mean, his last full season as a starting quarterback, he's 12th best by PFF, 3,800 yards, 24 touchdowns, 500 yards rushing. What are we talking about here? Who cares what's fair? I think what's best for JJ is to develop behind a starting quarterback, but fair, it's time to stop treating him like he's the whole franchise. It's time to stop acting like they're the Minnesota McCarthys. They're not. They're the Minnesota Vikings, and they need to win some freaking games with Justin Jefferson, and they need to get him the ball. And if they do, with Brian Flores here, they have a chance to go compete for the division and go have a chance to go be a serious team in the NFC. I don't know if they can win the Super Bowl, but certainly they could be serious. If they had top 15 quarterback play last year, they would have been serious, and I would not have cared at all if it was fair for JJ to be on the bench or not. So, jeez. I mean, what are we doing here? What has Kyler Murray done to win a starting job? I mean, all right, we're going to end it there because no one's watched Kyler Murray or knows anything about him. You don't even know who this person is. Like, that is what's amazing. What has he done? Again, how many times do I need to say this? In The Athletic, Mike Sando every single year talks to NFL executives and coaches around the league, and they rank the quarterbacks every year. Going into this year, Murray was their 15th best quarterback. He's been as high as 12. JJ McCarthy was like the 40th best quarterback in the NFL last year. I mean, what has he done? He's been a top 12 quarterback multiple times in his career, 3 different seasons by PFF. He's like in the same exact bucket as Kirk Cousins, who this franchise once paid the most guaranteed money ever in history. It's the same caliber of quarterback. And when they did that for Cousins, he was coming off a 7-9 season and his team let him go. And everybody was on board with it. I mean, man, yeah, ask Drew Bledsoe about fair. It's not the National Fair League. I'll say that over and over again. I'm sorry life's been unfair, but they need to win games. And when this guy had a number 1 wide receiver, he threw to him time and time again, and they won a lot, and they had good offenses. He's not perfect. But man, we're talking about a comparison that's nowhere close. It's just nowhere close. Adept says it gets exhausting how everyone is on extremes. Nothing could be, it's in a gray area. Let's wait and see. Yeah. Well, there is some gray area for sure when it comes to Kyler Murray, because he has performed when he's had good supporting casts quite well. And I would just say, if you would like to be informed about this, If you don't, that's fine. And I think a lot of you don't. But if you'd like to be, I had a very good interview with an Arizona Cardinals reporter the other day on the channel. So after this, if you want to go look it up and take a listen to Alex Clancy talk about Kyler Murray, because it's a very fair, very balanced breakdown of all the narratives about Murray, and some he agrees with and some he doesn't. So you might want to check that out rather than just saying things that are not remotely accurate about him. TM says an elite center is more important to a young quarterback than an elite wide receiver. I do not agree with that, but elite center also elevates the entire line. Look, I'm big on center. The NFL pays the top center what they pay a number 2 wide receiver. The difference is enormous. If you can't throw to Justin Jefferson, you just can't start here. I think this center is extremely important, and I think they need one really bad. But I also think, like, if you can't throw to Justin Jefferson, you can't play here. Justin Jefferson has elevated everyone, including and especially Kirk, but also Sam Darnold and also Nick Mullins. Everyone that he's played with has turned to gold, even Carson Wentz. So there's only really one guy who hasn't been able to find him, and that was J.J. McCarthy because of inexperience. I really think McCarthy put way too much pressure on himself every time he was throwing to Justin Jefferson, and he struggled with timing and accuracy. And I think he also struggled with people just tell you, you've got to throw it to him more often. You've got to throw it to him more often. So then he pushed the ball to him in spots that weren't ideal, and it wasn't good. More experience, more time. That's what J.J. McCarthy needs, is more time to develop. They need someone who can actually play. So, all right. Yes, Joe is correct. He is an accurate thrower. In fact, he was one of the best in the NFL in terms of the not having bad throws. From 2020 to 2024, he's one of the top 5 in not having bad throws. And 10 Wiggins, you are correct. None of these quarterbacks are perfect. That's right. Bradley, yeah. It's funny, like, that this franchise's best ever quarterback played like Kyler Murray, which is Fran Tarkenton. Scrambled around and he was undersized. I know it was many, many, many years ago, but it's sort of funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get so if Kyler Murray was so awesome, why was he benched this year? Why are you being intentionally dense, right? Like, I think that's my problem with a lot of the Murray people. Like, you know why? You know what happened. You know what they did. You know they were tanking. What? Like, you know exactly what Arizona's doing. Also, holding up Arizona's hysterical. If Arizona, the team that makes all the right decisions. Did we not see Sam Darnold come here from the Jets? And everyone said, right, oh, the Jets are stupid and terrible. And so was Carolina. Oh, yeah, but Arizona, now they're brilliant. And they've always nailed it. So let me move on to other stuff. Because as you guys are right, like, we'll have plenty of time after they sign him to argue about this. Aram says if they do not extend Brian O'Neill, does tackles shoot up the draft board needs? Whew, yeah, that's a great point. I think that they do want to extend Brian O'Neill, and I think O'Neill is worthy of an extension, even in his elder age now, and that he's been a little banged up in recent years, but it's hard to find tackles. And I saw, one of the Raiders reporters arguing with people over Colton Miller, and who's been a top-notch tackle for the Raiders for a long time now. And I responded to that and just said, you just don't get rid of tackles. They're so hard to find. You have to draft them high, but then they take years of development. O'Neill was not perfect right away. Darisaw was as close as it gets, and even he needed until his second, third season. And that's a fast development curve for tackles. A lot of times it is second, third season where they start to really take that big step forward. So it might be something that they try to split the difference with. But you're right. If they don't extend him, then yeah, tackle. And this is a good tackle draft. So I do feel like they need to think about that if they're not going to extend him. It's just that once you start adding up all the things that make sense. So if you're going to move on from Grenard, then you need an edge rusher probably. And if you're going to move on or not extend O'Neal, then you need a tackle. It might be a situation where you just draft a tackle if the wheels come off of Darisaw, or when Brian O'Neal leaves, then you draft one to replace him, but that's kind of tough. Packers released Elgton Jenkins. Would you pick him up? He's got a lot of injuries, and I don't think he was a great center. I think he was a good guard, but I don't think he was a great center. Thank you, Max, for the super chat for the Diet Dr. Pepper Fund. Thank you. I appreciate that. I went with the big giant water bottle for today at the moment, but I ran out of Diet Dr. Pepper, so I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. Does Arizona not have a weight room? There's some issue with the weight room. There is some issue with the weight room. They gave it really terrible grades. As far as Elgton Jenkins goes, though, maybe you'd consider it because he's been a good player in the past. Injuries are such a problem, and it is kind of something that we talked about last year a lot, and I never knew what to do with it. What do you do when people are talking about injured players? What do you do? Like, oh, this guy has had injuries or that guy's had injuries, but hey, you could get a deal if he's had injuries, right? And so they said, sure, let's take a shot at Hargrave. Let's take a shot at Allen. Let's take a shot at Kelly. Let's bring back Aaron Jones, all these guys with disturbing injury histories. And what happened was some of them stayed healthy and some of them didn't. It's kind of a roll of the dice, but Jenkins, I could take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Now, you wouldn't ever want to consider a player that someone else was letting go. No, that's just Kyler Murray snark. Sorry. Let's take a look at what the numbers say about Jenkins. At his best, he was a very good, actually his best grade was at left tackle, which is kind of interesting, but he was a very good pass blocking left guard. 538 snaps last year with very solid pass protection numbers. Only allowed 10 pressures in 310 dropbacks. Those are good numbers at center for Jenkins. He has played center a couple times in recent years, and it really was last year that was an injury year for him. Let's put it under the category of, I don't think it's crazy to consider, but I also think that if you're asking me, would I rather them just draft someone and have them paired with Blake Brandel and kind of see who wins? I might go that direction. I might go the direction of just, hey, go with Brandel. Like, those numbers right there from Jenkins are not crazy different than Brandel's, whose weren't great, but they also weren't horrific either. And he had some good games. The other thing about Brandel, and somebody mentioned the experienced center, is that Brandel knows the offense inside and out. This guy's been around forever. Derek, thank you for the unbiased, on Kyler Murray. Yeah, well, I mean, look, when it comes to the Kyler Murray discussion, I'm just letting the facts tell the story for me. And I feel like when you compare the case of, well, I've watched all of the tape and I've looked at all the numbers and I've read all the stuff and I've talked to the people in Arizona versus he's short. And it's like, well, okay, I feel like these two things should be valued differently. But of course, I don't deny and would never try to that there are issues with Kyler Murray and there's a reason he's available. Of course there are. I was watching a play the other day in the opener against the Saints last year where it's a dagger route and he doesn't see it over the offensive line. He scrambles. Now he gets a 10-yard gain, but he scrambled rather than letting go of the ball and hitting his guy open over the middle. It's going to be an issue. There are things they will have to work around if they end up signing him. There's no doubt. His inconsistency is problematic. He runs himself into sacks. There are times when he's sort of tried to tune it up a little bit and throw it harder and is inaccurate. So there are definitely problems. But and some of his play down the stretch, I think that's a tad overstated, but like there's some of his play down the stretch has not been as good as early in the season. Is that Cliff Kingsbury? I'm not sure. Not perfect, but I also am not sure which quarterback who's available is. That is something we have to consider too, is what's the best option for everyone? What's the best option for the Vikings, for Jefferson, for the price tag, for JJ McCarthy? And I don't think it's the best for JJ McCarthy to play this year, at least not right away. Yeah, you're right. about Murray seems to make people more angry than bringing up Christian Ponder. User H something. Do you think they'll just run it back with JJ and Carson instead of signing anyone? No, I don't think so. They're going to sign a starter, I think. Gunja, love the James Pierre signing. I should point that out, that the James Pierre signing, like, he's a guy who is kind of interesting from a numbers perspective. And I can pull this up for you. He didn't play a whole lot early in his career as an undrafted free agent, and then started to find a home. Well, they've already got him as a Viking. Look at that. Good job, PFF. He started to find it these last 2 years. Didn't play that well in 2024, but in 2025 played 377 snaps, 235 in coverage, had an 86.8 PFF grade overall and 89.7 in coverage, and had very good numbers in terms of targets and receptions against. So he was targeted 33 times with only 14 receptions against. And for his entire career, he's only allowed a 54.9% completion percentage into his coverage. So as far as your veteran backup kind of guy goes, that's pretty good. That's pretty good for James Pierre. As a backup, kind of easy signing, veteran, will play special teams for them. Doesn't cost so much. Yeah, Douglas, I agree on Jenkins that he is a good pass blocking center. And I guess if you're talking about a very cheap contract, maybe a 1-year thing, and you've got Brandel as a backup and you've got Juergens as a backup. But what I don't love and what I didn't love last year was who's the center this week. You'd much prefer, and you can't guarantee that Brandel's going to be healthy or Juergens going to be healthy the entire time, but you'd much prefer that you have an option there that every single game is the same center. So you have the cadence down, the snap down. There were a few snapping issues with Brandel. You have the communication up and down the offensive line and the changes at the line of scrimmage and all that. You've got all that settled with your center, rather than my concern would be about Jenkins of just the injuries that he's accumulated over the years. And would you be, all right, this week it's Jenkins and then next week it's Brandel and then, right? So I don't know if you want that, but in terms of his pass blocking for his career, it's always been above average. And if you're talking about a minimum type of salary, then yes, but there's also a bunch of teams who could be interested. The center around the league is very highly needed. Look what Tyler Biadasz got. He got released by the Commanders, and then he ends up showing up with the Chargers for a huge deal. Commanders could be in on Elgton Jenkins as well. There's always going to be some teams that are willing to overpay. And that's what has made today kind of weird a little bit, because the Vikings have been that team for a while. We've had big first days of free agency in recent years. And right now we're kind of just sitting on our hands wondering, okay, what's the next step here? Is it to try to look at some of these guys who are, down the list a little bit, as opposed to guys who have been more proven in the past and they spend more money? Josh, the James Pierre signing was their Isaiah Rodgers move. I think it's sort of in that ballpark. Rodgers was a weird situation because he had the gambling situation, and I think that he kind of went under the radar because of that, and it was still 27. So Pierre's a little bit older, undrafted free agent, maybe doesn't have the physical skills as someone like Rodgers, but I get what you're saying, is someone who's a veteran that could come in handy. I like that could come in handy as a backup, or if you need him for a couple games, or a rotational player, kind of more like what Fabian Moreau did for them last year, which actually was pretty good. Morgan says if we get Kyler, they should go all in and go up and get Jeremiah Love. It would be fun. It would be fun if they did that, if they were to land Jeremiah Love. I don't think he's going to make it very far in the NFL draft, but with the running back position, now we've seen a bunch of guys, Algier, ETN, I think Rachaad White is still on the board, but we've seen a bunch of guys go off the board in free agency so far. At the running back position, it's kind of been a huge day for running backs. Right off the bat, Kenneth Walker goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. and it shows you what the price tag is for the top running backs in free agency. I was not convinced it was going to be that way. After Javonte Walker signed back with Dallas for a middling salary, I thought, okay, well, maybe some of these guys will be affordable. And then, nope. No, they're not. The top running backs, and it's a good free agent class of running backs, but the top guys have cost a lot of money. So they likely have to wait around. If Jeremiah Love got to a certain spot, maybe you'd consider it. But, I think we all love going all in all the time. And last year was a really fun free agency because they're going all in and, oh, here we go. But as you see now, if you go all in, there are implications. And trying to go from 18 up into the top 10 is going to cost you a future first most of the time. Unless it's the 2022 draft. And then it doesn't on some sides. But most of the time, that's what it costs. Little Blue Jug said apparently Steelers cornerback coach from last year, Gerald Alexander, joined the Vikings. Yep, that's correct. So there's a link between him and Pierre. Yeah. Yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. That they brought in, Gerald Alexander. So he would know. And at least from what I saw from people from Pittsburgh, what they were tweeting is that his reputation is very good. He's worked for a really hard, really long time to have this opportunity. So my expectation is that he's going to be quality depth for them based on his numbers and what everyone's saying about him. Matt Varick, Jenkins might be attractive for the Vikings because of his positional flexibility, having played multiple places in the past. I mean, I think that the best version of him, or even 80% of the best version of him, would be fantastic. I think it'd be great. But are you getting that with the injury that he suffered this year? Maybe. And also, if there's a thought in the NFL that he's pretty good, there's so many teams that are in need of offensive linemen. Is he getting a big price tag? Because Washington released Tyler Biadasz, and you were like, that's kind of weird, but he had an injury at the end of the season, and maybe they're concerned about it, and maybe they think they're getting Linderbaum. I don't know. And then he signs a pretty big deal. It wasn't enormous. It wasn't mind-blowing, but it was pretty significant. And if we're working with prices with the Vikings where they don't want to pay anything, then it kind of wipes some of these guys off the board. I would be for it, Jenkins, overall. I think he is better than Blake Brandel. It's just, if you have to pay a lot, then you might have to just stick with Brandel. Kerpluppy, Brandel sailed the ball over Wentz, who is a literal giant, admittedly fearful of him snapping to Kyler. That's fair. That was crazy. But my criticism last year with the Brandel situation was not him playing center. I think he's a really good swing offensive lineman. It was that they never practiced it with him. They never, at any of the training camp practices over all the years that I've covered him, I don't remember Brandel ever playing center. And I remember they said something like, well, he does it on the side, or like, that's not what it's like in the game. So this year they would have him starting at center and spending all offseason snapping the ball, presumably low if it's going to be Kyler Murray, but just snapping the ball in general. And then you still have Jurgens, who's a developing player. I think he's more of a backup, but you can draft someone. In this draft, the third round is probably where you're getting the centers, and it's worth a shot there. So I look at it like they should just roll with Brandel, and they should draft someone and kind of have a competition and see how that plays out. Realistic running back targets, at least as of right now, my most realistic is Rachaad White. And then after that, Emmanuel Wilson from the Packers and Keaton Mitchell. Mitchell is very, very fast. Not exactly the type that we've been talking about. We saw Wilson last year play against the Vikings. He's pretty good. Kind of just a guy, but they might end up with just a guy to go with Jordan Mason. And Rachaad White is an exceptional player. But if you're Rachaad White, you're probably looking for similar contracts as some of these other guys. I don't think he's going to get quite as much money. Maybe he's a better deal than Travis Etienne. And I think he can do all of that stuff. You look him up as a wide receiver, and at least as a pass blocker, he's not. Etienne was legitimately awesome last year. He's not Etienne, but I think he's solid, Rachaad White, as a pass protector. So he's my top choice. If you guys have other ones that you're interested in, but Mitchell getting released, everyone that I know who followed Baltimore just was apoplectic that they wouldn't use this guy more. Maybe that's like their Ty Chandler. I don't know. Taylor Odafe-Oweh, 4 years, $100 million to Washington. Yep, you're right. Your conclusion is right that Grenard is really going to want another contract. Your conclusion, I believe, is totally correct. These numbers for edge rushers, if you're his representation, you're got to be looking at it going, trade us somewhere where we can get a new contract. And if you're the Vikings, you're saying we want a second round pick back. If it ends up, because Jeremy Fowler's report was day 2. If it's a 3, okay, but that's not great to lose a player like that. The dollar figures are going up and up. Joe said, if anyone cares, we need a new punter. Oh, we care. Oh, I started the show with it 3 hours ago. Oh yeah, it matters, man. The holder for Will Reichard, the field position, which look, they're not going to have Josh Allen as their quarterback. They will need to do the other things. And that goes back to the Kyler Murray where there is gray area. You do need to have a healthy and good offensive line for him. You do need to have your receivers catch the ball. You do need to have a running game. All those, yeah, absolutely. You need to have everything else around him. You need to have your defense be strong or you probably won't win. And that includes occasionally having a punter who does his job. And Ryan Wright was really good. He deserved a contract he got. Morgan Kyler would win enough games that are 2027. Wouldn't be able to get one of the top quarterbacks. Yeah, I mean, look, that's probably always going to be the case with no matter who they get. And if you were in a different universe, maybe you tear it all down, you trade away everybody, and you play Max Brosmer quarterback every game, and you win 1 out of 17. They're not going to do that. No matter who starts, how many wins would they have if JJ McCarthy starts every game next year? At least 8, right? At least 8 if they start McCarthy, because his throwing may be problematic and I think it will improve. His scrambling is good. And if he could protect the football a little better than he did midway through the season, you can win 8 games with JJ McCarthy if he's your starter. There's just too much talent on this team to not be at least in that conversation. And last year was certainly proof of that. Because last year, they still end up with 9 wins, despite the fact that they had tons of injuries early in the season and terrible overall quarterback play. Absolutely terrible. They're one of the worst teams in the entire league for their total franchise quarterback play, and they won 9. With Brian Flores, Kevin O'Connell, you're not going to be a team that's winning 3 games and is drafting high. In a different world, yes, you're right. And this is the show that will forever and always advocate teams fully rebuilding and going all the way to the bottom at times and drafting their quarterback and building it back up and so forth. It's a good way to do it. And we just saw, Drake May in the Super Bowl. So it's happened a lot and it does work. They're not going to do it that way. This franchise with this ownership's not going to do it that way. And they just have too many good players to do it that way, especially Justin Jefferson. The goal for this year should be, no matter who's playing quarterback, that Justin Jefferson's at 1,500 yards and wants to sign a longer-term contract extension. That's a very important thing for the future, but it should also be back to respectability as an offense and have a chance to compete for that division. Because I look around at the division and go, okay, is Jordan Love better than Kyler Murray? Yes. Is it at Kyler Murray's best? Is it by a lot? No. And Jared Goff, I think a lot of as a quarterback, but he's not a playmaker. And his team once gave up on him, by the way, and traded, their franchise quarterback for life, Matthew Stafford. They're trading him away, and you end up with Jared Goff being treated like he was total garbage when he got to the Lions. It's happened many, many times where quarterbacks are just sort of left for dead and then come back and play well. So I think that they could compete for the division. And then if you get the right matchups or whatever, at least things are interesting going into the playoffs with where they're at and their approach. That's the way to do it. And after 2026, because you're still in the window and it shows you the moves that they've made, at least even so far, keeping Wilson, keeping Hockenson, it shows you they still believe in that window that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah touted a lot when he was here, which was 2025, 2026. Now, if you get to the end of this and this doesn't work out, or there's the natural tank, which is you didn't mean to, but you were just bad. Okay, yeah. But after this season, I mean, you look at the contracts, you look at the players, the ages, you're looking at much more of a big time reset for the roster after 2026. So you might as well play this out and try to have, a quarterback come in and give you a shot and squeeze every bit out of it that you can, and then go from there. Which is why, you're probably not making a big trade up or something like that. USS Liberty, any interest in Rico Dowdle or Sean Tucker? I know less about Sean Tucker. Let me take a look at Sean Tucker. That's my draft simulator. We're not ready for a draft sim yet. We need to know what's going to happen here. Where did it go? There it is. As far as Rico Dowdle goes, not that I have no interest in Rico Dowdle. I just don't think that he's kind of the guy that we've been really talking about. Sean Tucker. Let's see. He's only carried the ball 151 times in his career. He's graded pretty well. Decent yards after contact. Handful of explosive runs in a very small sample size. Okay. I mean, I'm not against it. 2024 was pretty effective in a very small sample. Wow, he had a really big game in 2024. Last year didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Did have one big game against Buffalo last year. This is the type of guy that you might end up having to get, though. Has he had to pass block much? Has not had to pass block a whole lot. 14 times last year. So there's almost no experience in doing that. This might be the type of guy that you have to go get, though, because you don't have a lot of money. Dowdle is an explosive player, but he is exactly the same as Jordan Mason. He doesn't do anything like from the receiving game or the pass play. And you're right. Wooly, he's a bad pass protector. Yep. That's not what they're looking for. Isaiah, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Would you trade for Brian Thomas Jr., Addison for BTJ and a third and a fourth? I would trade for Brian Thomas Jr., but I would not want Addison to go with him for exactly the reason that I was just talking about. Trading Addison is maybe like a next year thing. I look at Addison as this year is so cost effective that on his rookie contract, that if he catches 60 passes for 850 yards from Kyler Murray in route to having a top 15 offense, I mean, that's a lot of bang for buck. That is a lot of bang for buck. And then you can decide what you want to do. And then it gives you a little bigger of a sample size of how he's acted. I don't think the guy's going to see the light. It doesn't feel that way, but getting thrown out of a casino isn't the worst crime I've ever heard of. So I don't know that there's ever going to be this, wow, I should just behave type of thing for Jordan Addison. Maybe there will. Maybe you would have said that about Chris Carter early in his life. I don't know. Sometimes people develop the frontal lobe and get a lot better at decision-making in their life. So we'll see if that happens. But he's on a 1 year, $4 million contract right now. So would I trade for Brian Thomas Jr.? Yeah, I would definitely consider that for wide receiver 3, depending on the price. If nobody wants him because of what happened last year in Jacksonville, I mean, I'm at least intrigued by what happened the year before, unless there's something behind the scenes that we don't know. But if you were talking about a 4th round draft pick for him, then yeah, do that. And you need your wide receiver 3. And the case has been made pretty clear that if you want good receivers, you probably need to trade for them, like Pittsburgh did with DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. Oak Dog, it looks like the Vikings get a 3rd round comp pick. Yeah, that's the Darnold pick, I think, who hasn't been thrown out of a casino. I've been in a few in Las Vegas, and I have not been thrown out. Actually, funny story, real quick. We're 2 hours and 48 minutes into the live stream, so I'll tell just a quick funny story. When I was at Radio Row in Las Vegas, when the Super Bowl was there, I had to get up really early to go on some radio stations. So I went downstairs and I got they had a Diet Pepsi, which, if they want to sponsor the show, they can. I prefer the Diet Dr. Pepper. So I went to get, a Diet Pepsi and a Pop-Tart or something, just to kind of get the wheels turning a little bit at 5:30 in the morning. And the lady at the counter said, like, how you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm great. I was like, who couldn't have a good time here? And she looked at me like, are you joking? Like who couldn't have a good, and I was like, oh yeah. Like the people who are out there at 5:45 who have not gone to bed yet, who are still pulling slot thing. Like, yeah, those people. But I did not get thrown out. Have not been thrown out. No. Let's see. TM. People need to watch KOC's play calling for 2022 if you think that he doesn't value the run. The Bills game in particular helped them to have a good running back who plays every game. That is always a big part of the struggle of pigeonholing when it comes to Kevin O'Connell and he can't run. And there have been a lot of times through the years where it seems like just hand the ball off and don't try to be a hero. Don't try to win the way you want to win the way you have to win. And I'll give you a couple examples from last year. Atlanta, goal line. You get to the goal line on a great throw by J.J. McCarthy. Just give the ball to Jordan Mason. And instead, it's some kind of trickery and it doesn't work. And then you end up not scoring a touchdown on that drive. It just seemed right there. Like just Jordan Mason. That's what you got him for. Just run the ball. Justin Schools at left tackle. You got some injuries there. Your quarterback's not playing very well. Just give him the ball. And Philadelphia with Carson Wentz, 2nd and 1 at the goal line. There's even Pittsburgh, when Wentz throws a big interception, or is it a sack? I think it's an interception in that game. They had 2 big runs right before that. And it was, keep doing that. Like Pittsburgh's not stopping the run. Just keep doing that. And throughout the year, I think that he figured that out more, but they didn't have explosiveness. And if you look at the run pass ratio down the stretch, it definitely changed. The runs on first down, the runs on second down, they definitely changed. But through the years, if you look at the first half of 2022, Dalvin Cook is averaging over 5 yards a carry in the first half and just fades down the stretch. And when Darisaw gets hurt in 2024, the same problem. And then Madison was your running back. There just hasn't been that guy. And I think they really need to draft that guy. Cade says, Daniel Jeremiah had a fun idea on TV, given where the running backs landed. Kyler in trade up to 7 for Love. Said it would not cost next year's first to do so. I don't know. Usually it does. If you're trading up that much, usually it does cost the next year's first. But if it didn't, I just can't do it for a running back. If the Vikings were drafting 7th, I would say, okay, take them with your pick. Trading where they're at right now with the number of needs that they have, trading up seems like it would be pretty crazy. So Joe Burrow, maybe someday, Joe Burrow. Can't count anything out. Doomer KO, it's a mistake for the Vikings this offseason to worry about trying to win 9 games in 2027. Why doesn't PFF grade frontal lobes is a good question. That is a good question. No more mortgaging the future. Famous last words. What if we include Grenard? Oh, well, that now that's more interesting if they were going to include Jonathan Grenard. So, all right, well, here's where we're at for the day. I feel like it's been a very productive first run at breaking down the initial wave of free agency, but this is not the end of Purple Insider's coverage for the day. So what I'm going to do is wait for the second wave throughout the rest of the day. Maybe eat some food, maybe get some Diet Dr. Pepper, refuel. And later on tonight, Andrew Kramer and Manny Hill are both going to be on the show, 7 o'clock through question marks. Depends on how many of you are there asking questions and leaving comments. So we'll go through all the things that happened. Last year, what we saw, because I did this last year, I did an early and late show, was early on, there were a couple things that happened. Isaiah Rodgers signed, and then later on, it was like Byron Murphy coming back. So we'll go, the double dip for today. And if there's any breaking news, like big breaking news between then, if they trade Jonathan Grenard, I'm not leaving the computer for very far. I live very close to the grocery store to go get some soda. So no issues there. And I'll eat at home and stay very close. And I'm also working on over at purpleinsider.football, a recap of everything that happened that impact the Vikings today. So doing that as well. So I'm going to sign off for right now. And then later on at 7 o'clock tonight, we'll be back live. So make sure that you check in. You just said, wow, did something happen? Oh, Tua's going to the Falcons. Drink some water. I got the water. I got the water here. Yum. It's not great. Oh, Tua's going to Atlanta. Okay. Yeah, I feel like that was out there earlier. Right? We talked about that early in the show, that all of the insiders were saying hint, hint, wink, wink. But that's the interesting thing about the Kyler situation with the Vikings, is he could make his decision anytime. And if he does, I will be immediately on this. But Tua going to the Falcons takes, I think, the biggest threat to the Vikings out of three. There were three big threats. There were two big threats. It was Atlanta and Pittsburgh. There were three teams that I thought he could actually sign with. So now it's just the Vikings and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh making the move for the wide receiver might be compelling to Kyler Murray. And the fact that, the Colts, well, maybe, but it doesn't sound like anyone's going to make a mega offer for, it doesn't sound like there's going to be a mega offer for Daniel Jones. So he's probably going to stay with the Colts. So I don't think he's going to go to the Colts. It's possible, but maybe, maybe he will. It's possible. It looks like Daniel Jones is going to be their quarterback, but this takes away one of the biggest threats for Kyler Murray to the Vikings getting him. So now it's down. I think it's down to the Vikings in Pittsburgh. And this also shows you that even though he can't get cut till Wednesday, that this could just happen and they can agree to something at any time. So it hasn't happened yet, which means it's up in the air. And somebody asked a really good question. I know I was going to sign off here, but somebody asked a really good question the other day about, like, when does this need to happen? Or could they get into a scenario where they're looking around and going, I don't think the Jets are a threat for Kyler. If he goes there, what are you thinking? If he goes there, either no one wants him, which would be shocking, or he's just insane. I mean, they've spent a lot of money and they brought in Frank Reich and I love Frank Reich, but as their offensive coordinator, not exactly someone people were climbing over each other to have. So, I think that it's down to two. It'd be my guess. I think it's down to two with the teams for Kyler Murray. But considering that that this is happening, it means that at any time it could for Kyler. So as I said, if there's big breaking news, I'll be right back in this seat in a minute. If there's not something that requires immediately, like a James Pierre signing, no disrespect, then I'll be back at 7:00 tonight. So anyway, thanks everybody for checking into the stream. Really appreciate all the participation and hope to see you again later on this evening, or if there is breaking news. And I also wanted to say that every night from here, the rest of the week, all of free agency will be live every single night, the whole rest of the week. So whether they sign their quarterback or not, whether they make a big signing or not, whatever else happens, we'll be breaking it all down every single night. So lots of football for your face. All right. We'll see you later.